"Steve, where are you?" The wife shouted outside. "I'm here," she heard from somewhere deep in the yard. Alyssa walked down the path. She saw her husband standing with a shovel. She was surprised. It was too early to dig anything. When she walked over, she realized what was there. She smiled. Well, finally, she had been asking him to clean the cesspool for a long time. "Yo, do you know how much is in here?" Steve had a bandage on his face. "That's okay, but it'll be a decent toilet." She walked over to him and kissed him. The woman had wanted a restroom outside for a long time. There was one in the house too, but when a big company gathered outside, it was not comfortable to go indoors. And now she was glad that her husband had listened to her. Stiva looked out the window in the morning. The shovel was bothering her eyes, urging her to take it and work. He had long promised Alyssa that he would make the toilet clean, but he couldn't get his hands on it, and it was unpleasant. He gathered his thoughts, got up, and thought that today he would do everything. There was nowhere to put it off. He went out into the yard, took a tool of labor, and went to a small wooden structure. It took some huffing and puffing, but he got it sideways. Well, here we go. He put gloves on his hands and got to work. It was hard, but the man tried. When the job was half done, Steve decided to take the waste cart to the dump. He climbed out, looked at himself, wondered how he was going to get on, but then he waved goodbye and drove the cart down the path. He came back, jumped off again, and the work continued. Suddenly, the shovel bumped into something hard. Steve tried next to it, but it was there too. "The ground can't be so hard," he said to himself and poked the shovel further and harder, but nothing came out. Listen, come here," he shouted in the direction of the house. "What?" 5 minutes later, the woman was here. "Look," the man poked with the shovel in several places. A resounding thud could be heard. "What's in there?" She looked at her husband in surprise. "Treasure," he laughed. "You say that too," she smiled. "Okay, go, I'll get it, I'll call you." Steve sent his wife back. Still no help. The man started fumbling for the trim of what was here. It turned out the thing was not small. Steve huffed and puffed, tried, but could do nothing. Then he dropped everything and went into the summer shower. There he quickly stripped off a layer of dirt, put on another robe, and went after his neighbor. "Hi, Logan." He walked up to the fence and saw the man chopping wood. "Hey," he straightened up. "Come on, I need some help," he called out to him. "What have you got there again?" Logan didn't refuse, but he went reluctantly. "I was cleaning out the cesspool today, and I found something," he began to explain. "Treasure?" Just like Steve suggested the neighbor. "I don't know, but I told my wife the same thing." The man was cheerful. They went into the yard. "What a smell you have here," the neighbor grumbled. "Nothing, you'll get used to it." He led Logan to the hole. "Wow," Logan looked at the find. "You should change your clothes." The neighbor looked at him. He went to the barn and brought Logan some old clothes. When he had changed his clothes, the work continued. But the two of them couldn't get anything out. The box, or whatever it was, wouldn't budge. "I'll go get Lucas." Logan looked at his neighbor. "Yeah, just take off your clothes," Steve warned him. "I'm just going to the fence." He didn't want to waste time. He was already interested in what could be there. Sergi came to the rescue very quickly. He was already in his work clothes. Logan warned him. "The three of us worked together." They managed to shovel a little bit, and friends with crowbars picked it up. Now all that was left was to get everything upstairs. The neighbors were all muddy and their hands were slipping, but they were getting closer to the goal. When the big box was on the ground, the men looked at the find, and each began to sketch out ideas of what it might be. "It looks like a coffin," said one. Saying either, it was getting scary. "All right, showers are over there. You go ahead, and I'll do the work here," Steva commanded them. He went to the fence, took off the hose, untwisted it, hooked it to the water. The strong jet immediately began to wash away the dirt and everything else. The further the box became clean. Steva became convinced of his friend's words. It was indeed a coffin, but not a simple one, but a zinc one. When the friends returned, they opened their mouths. They stood there stunned and stared at the find. "Is it like that?" Logan asked. As you can see, Steve didn't know what to do or say next. He also went to take a shower like the others. Work was definitely over for the day. Steve called out to his wife. When she came out to look, she opped and crouched down. "Steve, that's it," she spoke softly, her voice shaking. "Can't you see?" He walked over to her. "I can see, but how? Where from?" Allison cried. Steve and Allison had long dreamed of buying an apartment. They were very picky. The couple had met recently. Both had marriage under their belt, children, but there was no love. They sought each other, and there was an instant spark between them. "Allison, are you in love?" her friend asked her when they met again. "You have no idea." The woman looked at Leslie in shock. "Where did you fall in love?" The woman didn't understand. "I will tell. You will not believe," smiled modestly Allison. Leslie sat back down and picked up her wine glass. They had a certain day to meet. Then the girlfriends put aside all their business and went to the countryside, where Leslie had a small cottage. All day long they'd just sit and drink wine and talk. "You know me, I never spend money for nothing," began her story Allison. "What's that got to do with it?" My friend was surprised. And that day everything was going wrong for me. I was going to work in the morning. I put on my tights, and I noticed an arrow on the way out. I looked at my shoes. I couldn't even wear them without tights, and I was upset. Allison sat down in the chair across from me. "So you went to the store and met him?" Leslie was trying to guess. No, 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 no. She put on her old sandals, which were comfortable without pantyhose, and hurried to work. Of course, she was late. There was no other way, she sipped from her glass. So what? She couldn't wait for Leslie's climax. The day went on as usual. At the end of the work day, I turned everything off and left the office. When I went down the stairs, I caught my heel on something and flew down. Leslie at that moment groaned and made big eyes. "And he caught you?" Again, she interjected. "Either you're listening or I'm not telling." Allison took offense. "Come on," she straightened her back. When she got to her feet, she realized there was a slight sprain. There was no heel on the sandal, so I sat down on these unfortunate steps. "And then he appeared, the prince on a white horse, and saved you?" Ira was getting sarcastic. "All right, I see you have your own stories and you're not interested in mine." Allison got up and went to get some snacks. "Come on," her friend followed her. "No offense, you just tell everything in such detail." She caught up and hugged Allison. They walked back in, sitting back down in their seats. I'm sitting there crying. I don't know how to go home. I see a cab waiting nearby. I'm glad. But then I realize it's going to cost a lot of money. She raised a finger. "So that's what frugality is all about," she smiled. "Yes," Allison agreed, and the driver saw it, and he got out of the car and came toward me. "I'm telling you, a prince," Leslie laughed. "Okay, so be it." Allison didn't argue with her. "What happened next?" she said, waiting for her friend to continue. "He came over and asked me what I could do to help. I showed him my swollen foot and heel, and he smiled. Then he helped me up and led me to the car. I didn't resist. We got in the car. Steve started talking to me. I was sitting there, and his talk gave me goosebumps." Allison blushed and looked at her friend. "Really? You felt it right away?" Leslie wasn't laughing now. "He admitted later that he had something like that," Allison said. "Wow, did you invite him over?" My friend was curious. "I wanted to, but I was shy. We got to my house, and I got out, and I couldn't stand on my feet. So he ran out, gave me his hand. I leaned on him. The perfume I smelled made me almost faint. Steve took me to my apartment and looked at me, but I couldn't understand what he wanted. They laughed later about the fact that he was waiting for payment," laughed Allison. "God, that's so Donaldic." Leslie stood up and added wine to the glasses. "I didn't dare ask him out. I thought we'd never meet again," she chided herself. "And the next day I got ready for work, stretched my leg, put on comfortable shoes, went out, and he is standing at the entrance." The woman blushed again. "He came for money," guessed her friend. "I thought so too, and he came out, invited me into the car, opened the door. I said I'd walk, but Steve insisted. He said it was a gesture of help, no payment." Allison was silent for a second, remembering something. "That's how you two met," Leslie concluded instead. "You could say that. After that, he came to pick me up in the evening, and then I was no longer shy. I told him to come up. I'll buy you tea." That's where we met at the table and got to know each other properly. Now together, while we communicate, but he calls to move to him. She put a glass on the table. How interesting. And they say there are no coincidences. Leslie was silent. After sitting down, Allison told her friend to come and visit her. She would introduce her to Steve. Leslie couldn't miss such an opportunity, so she agreed to come. They agreed on what day it would happen and went home. Steve was warned about the meetings with her friend, so he did not bother with calls and questions. When Allison was already home, she dialed him herself. Hi, she still felt awkward. It's young people getting to know each other, going out, texting, and they're doing the same. I've been waiting for your call, he said in his beautiful voice. Come over, she called him every time, because she didn't want to meet on his turf. I'll be there soon, he hung up and Allison started cooking. Steve had arrived as promised. Their evenings passed monotonously. First, they would sit at the table, drinking tea or wine. Then they'd go to a room, watch a movie, talk. But it never went any further. And one day, Statha came to see Allison. Why are you all dressed up? She didn't understand. Leslie was supposed to visit them today. Can't I wear a suit? He couldn't understand. Are you getting ready to meet my friend? The woman smiled. You could say that. I want to look at the highest level, Stiva admitted. Good, she'll be here soon. Alyssa knew Leslie was never late, and indeed, at exactly 7 p.m., the bell rang. The landlady opened the doors. Her girlfriend stood on the doorstep. Hi, she handed her a bottle of champagne and a box of chocolates. Come on in, Alyssa led her through the door. Leslie walked into the kitchen. There was a handsome man sitting at the table. She smiled at him and said hello. Allison's been telling me about you, he told her. And what did she tell you about me? Leslie smiled and looked at her friend. Nothing bad, only good. Stiva offered the woman a chair to sit on. This evening was a little more fun than usual. Leslie was telling different stories that she and Allison had going on. And then, when her husband left her, she got to this point. Please don't, then, put her hand on hers. Okay, I'm sorry, please don't. Leslie stopped talking. Did your divorce with him go badly somehow? Steve asked. In principle, everything is fine, but I do not really want to remember these moments, especially in front of you. She raised her eyes to the man. Okay, you do not want, so we will not. Stava was ready to do everything to make only this woman was happy. Afterward, they went to see Leslie off, and on the way back, Stiva suggested sitting down on a bench. Why, let's go home, Allison asked him. Wait, he waited until she sat down. Then he pulled something out of his breast pocket, got down on one knee, and handed the woman a ring. Steve, are you sure? Allison had been self-conscious about her age all along. More than ever, he told her, took her face in his palms, and kissed her on the lips. It made her feel so happy that everything trembled inside. They went home happy. Will you stay? Allison asked her boyfriend for the first time. If you let me, I'll stay, he told her honestly. That evening they got serious. Allison knew she would give the man a positive answer. She sat in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Yes, 45, but not old yet. She began to smooth her face. She had to break the news to her children, and Allison was afraid of how they would react. Her son Austin had long ago graduated from college, now lived and worked in another city, and had recently started a family. Her daughter was also enrolled and pleased her mother with her grades. Allison called first her son and then her daughter, inviting them to visit. The daughter was due this weekend, and the son said he'd be there too. That's when she'd introduce everyone and talk about getting married. Steve, don't you want to invite your kids? She called him the next day. They won't go, he said with certainty. Why do you think so? The woman was surprised. Their mother decides everything for them. His voice was sad. Well, don't be sad, she wished him and hung up. Everything was fine. The brother and sister met on Saturday. The mother was dressed up. Mom, what's going on? Olga was the first to arrive. In the evening, you'll find out she was laughing. She was happy. Since their father left, the children have never seen her like that. What secrets? Julia went into the room. Austin entered the apartment. Oh, it smells good. He sniffed the air with his nose. Hi, Allison came out to him. Wow, he gave a thumbs up in admiration. Trying hard, the mother hugged her son. After that, a friend came. She knew that Allison would introduce Steve to the children. but about the proposal was a complete surprise. "Who are we waiting for? Let's go to the table, because I'm very hungry," said the young man. "Let's wait a minute," his mother asked. She kept looking at her watch. "And who are we waiting for?" He asked everyone who was here. "Where's your wife?" His mother changed the subject. "She has no time, something about work, the daughter with her mother-in-law." He immediately answered all the questions. Good. Just as she said that, the doorbell rang. Allison got up from her seat, her cheeks flaming. She walked over and opened it. A man entered the apartment. "Meet Steve. This is Steve." She introduced him to the kids. Julia stepped out to him, the girl. Austin shook the young man's hand. "I am very pleased to meet the children of my favorite woman." Steva was gallant. "And now we can go to the table," said Allison cheerfully. And they all walked together into the hall. "You haven't said a word for so long, have you? It's obvious that you are not the first day together." The son looked at his mother and put a pie on his plate. "I'm sorry, but I felt a little uncomfortable, embarrassed or something. And yesterday Steve proposed to me," and she raised her hand with the ring, deciding there was no more time. "Mommy, congratulations. Uncle Steve's a great choice." Her daughter came up to her. "I'm telling her the same thing," said Leslie. "When's the wedding?" my son asked. "I don't know. We haven't been anywhere yet. But if everything goes well, it'll be in a month." The woman gibbered and looked at Steve. Yes, he was in agreement with his wife to be on everything. They sat, talking. Who was talking about what? The children stayed at their mother's and Steve needed to go home. He called Leslie for a ride. She didn't refuse. "See you later, love." He kissed Steve's hand. "Bye, darling," she smiled. "Mom, you're lucky." She and her daughter sat in the kitchen. "I don't understand how this could have happened," the woman replied. "Does he have children?" Austin joined them. "Yes, but they don't communicate," Allison told them. "Too bad," shook his head. After everyone had learned the truth, Allison announced the upcoming wedding at work. She herself didn't understand why she was so embarrassed when she talked about it. She hadn't taken anyone away from her family. She hadn't cheated on anyone. What was there to be ashamed of? "Listen, we congratulate you." The co-workers cheered, as did everyone else. "You deserve this happiness." They hugged her. "I invite you all to the wedding," she prostrated. "We will definitely come," agreed those. Steva and Allison applied, just as the woman had said. They were given a date in a month. Now everything had to be thought out and prepared. Steve did everything his future wife asked him to do. He went shopping, to the restaurant, to the atelier, because he realized that the woman already had a lot of problems. Everything was ready. The guests were gathered. It was the happiest day in the life of Allison and Steve. They were married. Now they had to decide where they would live. Tamara's apartment was small, but it was close to her work and the center. Steve's apartment was bigger, but it would be harder to get to. So far, they had settled on the first option. The woman was comfortable here. Everything was her own. No need to get used to anything. "And let's sell our apartments and buy one large and spacious," suggested the husband to his wife. Why, it was a good offer. She had never even thought of such a thing. Realtors called several times a day, wanted to show options, but the spouses were not satisfied with a lot of things. Old house far away, plumbing doesn't work, and other things. "You're so picky, as if you don't want us to buy something," Steve told her in the evening. "You know it's true. I don't want an apartment. Let's buy a house in the country," she suggested to him. "What about work?" He didn't understand her. "Yes, it will be far away, but nature, sauna and everything else," she said dreamily. "Well, let's see the options." Steva immediately dialed the realtor and said that their plans had changed. By the time Allison had found the cabin, the man's apartment had already been sold. He now had enough money to buy the house. "You wanted to sell mine too, didn't you?" Allison wondered. "Let there be at least some housing in the city," her husband told her judiciously. "That's right too. Olga will come there," she agreed with him. Now Steva and Allison drove through the villages and looked at the options that had been offered to them. "This house has been empty for a long time," the specialist told them. "I like it," said Allison. She walked inside, looked outside. Everything she wanted: bathhouse, vegetable garden, outbuildings. "We'll take it." "It took you so long to decide on an apartment, and you bought the house on the click," was surprised by the young man who offered them all this. "I guess I just wanted it more than a concrete box," Allison admitted. If everything is perfect, we can do the paperwork. The realtor said. We're in. The couple said in unison. Ellison took a vacation at work, wanted to do everything quickly, to move in now. The first thing the woman did was to get acquainted with the neighbors. She went first to one, then to another. A week later, a housewarming party was celebrated in their yard. Of course, the house was not ready to move in yet, but she wanted to make people happy. I think you'll be fine here, said Selena, who was Logan's wife. We hope so, Allison was sure. First, Steve put up the walls, then the roof. The neighbors helped when they had time. And today it was down to the cesspool, and there it was. Allison couldn't get away from what she saw. She looked at her husband with big eyes. Should we open it up? He asked. Do you think the genie will come out of there? Logan teased him. Yeah, bad idea. The man shook his head. He finished his work for the day, putting the wooden box back in place. Threw a tarp over what they found so as not to scare anyone. We should go see the old-timers, see if they know anything, Ellison suggested tonight. Tomorrow, I think everyone will know about this case and someone will find it, Steve said. They went to bed, but neither could sleep, both of them thinking about the terrible discovery. What else have you thought of? The man asked his wife. He wanted to get away from the sorrowful thoughts. We should bury it, said Allison. Yes, but first to find out what was going on, he realized. As Steve had anticipated, the next day everyone knew what he had found in the cesspool. But whoever Ellison asked about the former tenants, they just said, no, I don't know. I know there was a big family that lived here, said Selena, the neighbor. She and Logan, like Steve and Allison, had just moved in. The police should be called, Logan was sure. Yeah, they'd definitely look into it, Steve agreed. He didn't wait for other advice, dialed the number and called the police. The police arrived, and they were told everything, in some places even interjecting. You didn't open it? The officer asked. Of course not. Allison's eyes bulged. The coffin had been removed, taken away for identification and other matters. Ellison had seen it all. She had asked her husband to go into town for a few days to get away from the horror she had experienced the day before. Okay. As usual, he gave a positive answer. They drove to Ellison's apartment, talking the whole way about how it could have been someone's son or husband. The only thing that was unclear was how he ended up where Steve had found him. I'll tell you what, we'll probably live here until things clear up, he said to his wife, who didn't mind. Are you going to go there? Allison asked him. Yes, I'll go tomorrow and see if I can find someone else, he said, while he was thinking about something. Good, then I'll get on with work and other things. Allison didn't even want to think about it. Steve, as promised in the morning, got ready and went to the place where they had already settled down. He went straight to Logan's house. They first sat him down at the table to have breakfast. How is it here? Is it quiet? Asked the guest to the host. Nothing, said the friend. Interesting. Steve pressed his lips together. You know, I was thinking there are still people here. They live there, far beyond the village. They say there are old people. Maybe you can ask around. Logan suggested him. Great idea. I didn't even know where to start. Steve got up and went to the door. If you need help, just whistle, Logan told him in his back. As always, Steve looked around and walked out of the house. He circled the country roads for a long time, couldn't find anyone. But when he saw the houses in the distance, he got excited. And when he drove up, he realized he'd done it prematurely. Almost all of them were shriveled and leaning, as if no one had been here for years. Hey, what are you looking for? He saw a little grandmother. Hello, I wanted to know something about the village. He pointed in the direction. What's interesting there? She was mumbling. We recently moved in. We were renovating and then we found something. I'd like to know about the people who lived there before us. Steve talked on and on. Let's go. She beckoned him into the yard beyond the gate. Thank you. He followed the old woman. They entered the gates, which were shriveled from time. Steve looked around. It was obvious that nothing had been done here for a long time. There were huge, unsawed logs all over the yard. Maybe you need some firewood. The man asked the old woman. If you want to, so stay, she said indifferently. And the man took the cleaver. He took off his jacket and got to work. When there was enough firewood, in Steve's opinion, he finished and went into the house, where the grandmother had long since disappeared. That's enough for now. He sat down on a chair. "Who's going to wash your hands?" she told him sternly. "Well, where?" He looked. There was no wash basin anywhere. There, behind the stove, she pointed to the curtain. The man got up, washed his face, and went back to his seat. Grandmother moved very nimbly about her kitchen. She put milk and bread on the table and pulled a cast iron with potatoes from the stove. "Thank you." He couldn't wait to start eating. "What's your name?" A woman came to the bench and sat down. "Steve," he said in an open and friendly way. "And I'm Georgia." Grandma took a spoon. "Thank you, and pleasant." He started to eat too. After work, it was straightforward to feel hungry. "So what did you want to know there?" Georgia asked. "You probably don't know. We stopped by a house that had been empty for a long time, and there were these." The man stopped talking. "You mean them?" she asked. "I don't even know." He looked at her surprised. "Don't look. I used to live in that village too. I was their neighbor." She stood up, went to the sideboard and pulled out the photos. "What are these?" He took the pictures she held out to him. "This is the family you're talking about." She pointed her finger at Card. "I don't know. I didn't notice Steve's house at first. There were 3 people standing in the photo, husband and wife, and Grandma Georgia, of course. She was younger then. And then the man saw that they were standing near the very house where he and Allison now lived." "Did you get a good look at it?" Grandma smiled. "Yes, this is the house where we live now, or rather, we are going to." He put the picture on the table. "Oh, those people had a hard fate. Who would have thought it when 2 young and healthy people came to the village?" She shook her head. "Do you know their story?" Vanya was very interested in it. "How not to know? They were like children to me," the old woman marveled. "Will you tell me?" He fixed his eyes on her. "It's a long and sad story." It seemed that Georgia was about to cry. "Of course, I have to go to town to see my wife, but I want to get to the bottom of it," he assured her. "So be it. I'll tell you what happened to them." She got up, washed her hands, wiped the corners of her mouth with the handkerchief. Then she came again and sat down on the bench, put her feet up so she was comfortable, and looked at Steve. The village was prosperous then. We had everything. We worked, lived, enjoyed every day. The only thing was that the collective farm was short of hands. We wanted young people to come. But the young people at that time did not care about the village. They tried to manage somehow on their own. And then, what a joy! 2 young men arrived at once, Trevor and Katie. He's an agronomist and she's a medic. We welcomed them like honored guests. They were given a cottage, the same one you live in now. The boys were unmarried, so for about 2 years we talked them into getting married. Finally, they did, and Trevor proposed to Katie. Oh, how fun it was then. The whole village went out, beer, kvass, wine, flowed by the river. And the snacks were unprecedented. The old lady was silent, probably imagining how they had partied. And what happened then? To be honest, Steve was not very interested in the biography of young people. He wanted to get to the heart of the matter, but he was afraid to tell the woman about his find in case she got sick. I was their neighbor at that time. Every day they came to visit me. Then we had tea. Then with Katie made cakes for Trevor. They were soulful people. She stood up and walked over to the table to pour herself some tea. "Why were they? Are they gone now?" Steve asked. "I don't know about that." She sipped her tea. "After what happened to them, they didn't live long, and then they left, and I never saw them again." Grandma brushed away an invisible tear with her handkerchief. "What happened to them?" "I wanted to find out quickly and go home." "It's bad." The old lady shook her head. "Kathy, are you sure you want to live in the village? You're so young." A young man asked her. "If they sent me from the institute, then I have to go," she assured him. Well, Trevor and Katie met when they were students. She was in medical school and he was in agricultural school. They graduated, and when Trevor found out that Katie was sent to work in the countryside, he asked to go there himself. But now, when the time came, he regretted his choice. No, he still loved Kathy, but he didn't want to live in the village all his life. "Why don't we work for a few years and then leave?" he asked her. "Well, after a few years we'll see," she told him. As soon as the chairman learned that 2 young people were coming to him, he immediately allocated them a house. The girl and the young man quickly settled there, whitewashed the walls and painted the floors. They were sociable, so everyone in the village knew and loved them. "Aunt Georgia," Katie called her neighbor. "What do you want?" She turned around. "Come and visit me. I baked a pie, she called her. She was happy to come, and they sat at the table, chatting and drinking tea. At some point, the whole village began to persuade them to get married, but Kathy said that she was still young and it was too early. And after 6 months, the girl felt that she was not alone. She told her husband about it. There was nowhere to go. The wedding was going to take place anyway. Ogully Valley heard to the glory and began a simple life of two people who lived together. Oh, kicking. Katie sat on the couch. Then her husband would lie on her belly and listen. It's like there's not just one baby in there, but a whole team, he would say as he felt kicks through her belly. You know, I feel like there's more than one baby in there too. Katie confirmed his words. What did the doctor say? He asked her. Who says what? She said. It wasn't very complicated. Katie was pregnant, and when she had to give birth, she had invited her Aunt Georgia and another one, who was a medic. She went to the nurse's station where she worked. Why are you here? Georgia asked her when she got there. I don't want to go to town. It's far away and no one close to you will come to you, the girl said. Okay, as you know, we'll deliver the baby. We've done it more than once, the woman assured her. Okay, I'll give you a hint if anything. Katie was so small and her belly was climbing up to her forehead. When it started, the women scooted in. Katie breathed. She knew how to do it right. Push, shouted Georgia, and the girls started. Time passed very slowly. The pain was unbearable. Finally, the head came out, and then the rest of the body. There, a woman lifted the baby in her arms, a boy. The second woman took it from Georgia. Katie had no time to rejoice, but the pain came again. What's that? The neighbor was frightened. The second one, Katie exhaled. Oh my God, it was starting again. After a few minutes and the second little boy was in the woman's arms. You knew? Why didn't you tell me? Georgia threatened with her finger. It's okay, was the exhausted girl. The babies were bathed and placed next to their mother. What are you going to name them? The one who had just delivered the babies was delighted. Anthony and Donald. Katie lay back and looked at her babies. Anthony was mobile. He was roaring and active. Donald, on the other hand, lay motionless. What's wrong with him? Kathy asked. That's for you to tell me. Georgia shook her head. She wanted to get up, but Katie couldn't do it. When it all came out, it turned out that the boy had been born disabled. He was just like his brother, except that he developed differently. Katie cried a lot. Trevor supported her in everything. But there was nothing to do. She would never leave the baby. From the day they were home, all her time was devoted to Donald. Of course, Anthony wasn't without his mother's love either, but he could do a lot on his own. You take such good care of them, Trevor often said. They're my little blood. The mother held her sons in her arms. Let me help. Her husband never said no when his help was needed. Kathy would give Anthony to her husband, and she would sit with Donald. The boys were growing up. Anthony was already walking, and Donald was still sitting on his mother's lap. She went to hospitals, went to witch doctors, took the child to the witch doctor, all to no avail. I'm going to work, hang in there. The husband kissed his wife and left. It was hard, but Katie coped with everything. Georgia helped her. When it was necessary to go to work, the girl could not. She wrote a letter of resignation. She had a disabled son in her arms. It was sad. People started coming to her house for her to see them and treat them if needed. Anthony stopped it, yelled the mother to her son as he molested his brother. Why him? The boy pouted. Often the boy had to stand in the corner for hurting his brother. Katie worked with her son. She gave him massages and medication. By the time it was time to go to kindergarten, Donald could already move a little independently. The mother rejoiced at her son's first successes. She did not give up, took him to doctors, practiced herself. Anthony, get ready for kindergarten, his mother told him. She had already dressed Donald and was waiting for her second son. Why do you always dress him and not me? The boy took offense. Let me help you. She put Donald in the stroller and went over to her son. After that, they would go to the garden. Donald would babble something in the stroller. After one son went to the garden, Kathy felt better. She had more time at home. She did the laundry, ironed, took care of Donald, did the housework. Everyone who knew her in the village often came and helped her, some with clothes, food, some even gave her money. Katie refused, but they shoved her down. How was your day today? Trevor would ask in the evening. He came when the whole family was already gathered. It was fine. The girl would get up and kiss her husband. By the time the boys reached school age, the mother decided to put Donald in the first grade. He could walk. His head was working properly. She invested so much effort in the boy that she hoped for understanding of the leadership of the educational institution. Let's see how he will behave, how other children will accept him, did not refuse her. Trevor, Donald got into the first grade. She rejoiced in the evening. Are you sure he'll do well? Her husband doubted. In knowledge, I have pulled him up. He is not inferior to ordinary children. She was surprised at Trevor's distrust. Anthony and Donald walked to their first call on their own feet. Katie was only a little supportive of her son. How worried she had been when they first left for lessons. All day long she sat wondering how her boys were doing. Had they fought? Had they had a fight? Mom, Anthony came running into the house. Where's Donald? She looked behind him. He'll be here in a minute. He's a cripple, laughed his brother. What are you talking about? And where did you hear that word? Mom was angry. If the parents needed to go somewhere or to work in the garden, they left the boys with Georgia, who didn't mind. Who's going to school? A neighbor came in the evening. We did, the boys shouted with glee. They all sat down together at the table and ate the delicious pie the woman brought. Thank you, you always help us out, Katie told her. And the woman saw how hard it was for her. She hadn't started a family herself, and now it was too late. Georgia loved Kathy like a daughter, and her children were her grandchildren. Trevor worked, the children grew up, and now it seemed that the family was restored. By winter, Kathy decided to go out to work. The residents rejoiced because they had never found anyone. There was one doctor who came from out of town, but he only lasted 6 months. If you need anything, you ask for it right away. Don't be shy, the neighbor told her. It's a must, the girl thanked her. Trevor often came to the neighbor's house after work. She'd buy him tea and he'd cry on her shoulder. What is it this time? The woman sat down at the table, on which there were candies and gingerbread. Nothing. Katie is pitiful. He took a sip of tea. What's there to feel sorry for? Look how well she did. She got the boy back on his feet. Georgia understood him, but she shouldn't be like him. I can't stand to see her doing all this. And then she comes into the bedroom and drops dead, Trevor said. She'd come up to him and stroke his head. It was often like that. Katie knew Trevor went there, but she didn't say anything because she knew he was tired too. The man worked 2 jobs to make money for the family. Kathy, why don't we go to the seaside and have a vacation? He suggested it one day. Now the boys are on vacation, we'll definitely go. She knew it would be very good for Donald. And as soon as the boys finished first grade, they bought train tickets. Mom, it's so nice here, sat Donald on the sand. Yes, son, she looked up and saw Trevor and Anthony splashing in the water. Here, the couple had a chance to spend some quality time together. Did you get some rest? Trevor asked her when they had gone to bed. Yes, thank you. Sweetheart, she kissed his shoulder. Everyone went home in a positive mood. There was a great mood. Nobody forgot about the neighbor. They brought her some shells and beautiful stones from the sea. Well, how? She was already waiting for them at the gate of their house. Fine, smiled the family. Anthony was pestering his brother again. Calm down, the mother threatened them with her finger. Within a day, she was already out at work. Georgia was with the boys now. A month passed. Kathy sat in her office. Grandpa Frank came in to see her. What's troubling you? She got up from her chair. Abruptly dizzy, Kathy fainted. Daughter, what's wrong with you? Bent over, her grandfather bent over her. She opened her eyes and smiled. Grandpa Frank gave her the same smile. I guess I'll be going. He got to his feet and walked toward the exit. Katie didn't stick around either. She was in a hurry to get home. What are you doing here? Georgia was surprised that she had come so early. I think we're going to have another family member soon, Kathy said excitedly. Oh, really? The neighbor said excitedly. They sat down at the table, poured tea, and waited for Trevor to come home from work. When he came, the women told him everything. It was very happy news. By the end of the summer, it was clear that Katie was not wrong. She was really expecting a child. It's a girl, Georgia told her. How do you know? Katie turned to her. Look, what a lifeline, laughed the neighbor. Kathy was feeling bad now. She was nauseous all the time. It was hard to go to work, but she kept going. Her fellow villagers felt sorry for her again. During her pregnancy, the girl had lost a lot of weight. She looked sickly. What if she was sick again? She shared her fears with her neighbor. Do not think about it ahead of time, she advised. Trevor became more attentive to his wife. The boys realized that the mother is difficult. They tried not to bother her with their arguments, behaved quietly. Anthony and Donald were in the 2nd grade. Now that his mother was lying at home, Donald had a hard time. He did not understand much in his studies, and the woman could not help. Trevor tried his best, but he couldn't keep up with all these tasks either. Stop shouting, you see, Mom is not well. Sometimes he broke down into a shout. He understood that it was hard for Katie to hear and see it. The labor started suddenly. It wasn't due yet. It scared Katie even more. She woke Trevor. He quickly ran to get Georgia. Now it was just the two of them. Trevor took the boys into the other room. No one was sleeping that night. It hurt, moaned Katie. Oh, girl, you should go to the hospital, worried the neighbor. The child was walking forward. We'll get through this, Katie said. Georgia had delivered babies, but she didn't have that much experience. She twirled her belly. Finally, Katie stopped her. It's starting, she shouted so loudly that Donald in the next room flinched and clung to his brother. No one was keeping track of time, but as it began to get light outside the window, a baby's cries echoed through the house. Well, thank God, Trevor exhaled and hugged the children. Daughter, Georgia came out of the room. She was so tired, as if she had not delivered a baby in unloaded coal. How are you? The man looked into the room. Good. His wife nodded to him. He walked over and looked at his princess and smiled. After that, Katie began to blossom. She and her daughter, who was named Pamela, took her sons to school together, started helping Donald with his studies again. Trevor saw that his wife was healthy. It was visible to the naked eye. The boys continued to study. When they were in the 5th grade, Fiona went to kindergarten, and the mother went to work. From that point on, no one worried about anyone. How's Donald doing? Patients who came to see Kathy would ask. You know, the bigger he gets, the less you can see of his handicap, she answered and smiled. That's great. They thanked and left happy locals. Kathy was happy. Fiona made her happier every day. But the boys, that's another matter. What have you done again? She had to deal with them tonight. Nothing. Why are they calling him names? Anthony said. He always stood up for his brother so that, God forbid, he would not be beaten up or do something worse. I understand all that, but we need to be careful. She pretended to be angry with them. We're sorry. The brothers apologized as best they could. Katie didn't expect anything bad to happen, so she forgave and kissed her blood. When Fiona had to go to 1st grade, the boys were already in 8th grade. That's where the trouble started. Anthony got mixed up with a bad crowd, started doing all sorts of naughty things. And most importantly, he dragged his brother along with him. What's that smell? Mom asked me at night. Mom, we're adults, Anthony told her. She could see that Donald was not feeling well. He was standing and swaying. Son, what's the matter with you? Kathy was frightened. I need to lie down, the man said. And then all night long the woman didn't sleep. Not only did she have to help her daughter do her homework, she had to run after her sons. And in the morning she had to go to work. Trevor, talk to them, she begged her husband. I can only whip them. He clenched his fists. Why go to extremes? Katie didn't understand. You and your good nature will only make things worse, he told his wife. I'm asking for your help. Kathy began to cry. All right, I'll talk to you tomorrow, he promised. Katie hoped so. And then something happened that made her mother feel so bad that she had to go to the hospital. The boys were 15 years old, and that night they were out for a long time. At first, the parents were not worried. Their sons could sometimes stay out late. But when it was 2 in the morning, the mother and father were not on a joke frightened. Katie went outside. She went and knocked on George's door. She, though asleep, got dressed and went outside. Shall we walk around the village? The woman asked her. Shall we split up? The neighbor suggested it. No, together first. Katie disagreed. They walked on, knocking on every house with a light on, but there were no boys anywhere. They reached the end of the village where the quarry was. they saw a fire burning in the distance. "That way," Katie said. They rushed toward where the light was flickering. Donald was lying by the fire, dead drunk. "Son," Kathy began to cry. That's all he could say. "Can you get up?" She tried to get him up, but she couldn't do it. Katie looked at Georgia, who came over, and together they managed to get the boy to his feet. A hand on his shoulder, Katie showed her neighbor. They were weaving some, because the guy, who was completely relaxed, was hanging on to them. Presently, they put Donald on a bench a few houses away. She ran, went inside. "Trevor," she called to her husband in a whisper. What they found him. He also spoke, because the daughter was already asleep. "Help, please. He's sitting on the bench, Georgia, and I just can't carry him already. It's very heavy," she whispered to him, and she was very nervous. "Okay, wait. Just don't worry." He put something on his feet and ran out of the house. Trevor easily threw the guy on his shoulder and carried him to the house. Put him on the couch. He's drunk." He turned away from his son. "That's right. And where's Anthony?" The mother sat down next to Donald and cried. "Why are you crying? They have their own head on their shoulders." Trevor was getting nervous. "I know they have a head on their shoulders, but how old are they?" Katie continued to cry. "If he's not back by morning, we'll report him," the man said unequivocally. By morning, when Donald woke up, the first thing he did was ask for water. "Where's Anthony?" Kathy bent over him. Anthony remembered what had happened yesterday. Anthony, your brother." His mom was standing next to him. "Listen, yesterday we met the townspeople. They came to visit us in the village and asked us to take them somewhere where they could make a fire. So we took them to the quarry, and they took bottles out of a bag and started serving them. I don't remember, but I think Anthony went off with them," Donald said. "What are you talking about?" Kathy ran around the room. She didn't know what to do. What townies? Where did they go? How many of them were there? She began to gather herself. "Where are you going?" Trevor came out to her. "To the precinct," she said. "We need to do something." Anthony had left with the townspeople. She was already outside the gate when she saw her son. He was walking. His pants and shirt were torn. His face was bruised. "My God, my son, where have you been? What happened to you?" She ran up to him. "Ma, I need to lie down," he told her practically in syllables. She took him inside and put him on the couch. "Is Donald here?" That's all he asked. Here, how did you get here?" She screamed and cried. Fiona came into the room. She looked at the brothers and could not understand what had happened to them. A few days later, a private man came to their house. Trevor himself was very surprised at his visit. He let the man into the kitchen and they sat down at the table. "Is Anthony home?" The man in the uniform asked then. "Yes, I'll get him right away." He entered the room. After that, the policeman told everything. "A few days ago, your son robbed the store with other boys," the policeman said. "That can't be." Katie jumped up from her stool. "All the evidence is against him," the cop insisted. "What do we do now?" The woman didn't understand. "Pay the fine and it's all over at once, or I have to take him away," the man said. "Okay, we will pay everything," exhaled the woman. She did not understand how from such a boy, which he grew up, could grow up such a bully. Anthony had gotten away with it, but he had gotten the worst of it at home from his father. "If you ever lay a hand on another man's property again, you'll know what prison is," a man told him. I get it. The boy didn't look at his father. "You know he can't drink. Why don't you keep an eye on it?" Katie wondered. "Mom, I got it." You could see that the guy was hurt and offended. After that, the boys quieted down a bit. Donald spent most of his time at home and Anthony was always doing something. His mother wouldn't get out of the principal's office, but nothing else happened. After this incident, Kathy began to feel sick, dizzy all the time. No pills helped. But she wouldn't go to the hospital because she was afraid of what they'd say. "Katie, what if it gets worse?" Georgia admonished her. "Thank you for your concern, but I can manage on my own," the woman replied in the same way to everyone. She was tutoring her daughter and trying to counsel the boys. "What are we going to wear to the prom?" The boys asked their mother. "Let's buy you suits," Mom suggested. "Good," they cheered. Anthony wanted to go to the city after graduation and work there. Donald didn't know what he wanted to do. His mother couldn't insist, so she just gave advice. "Why do you need to go to the city? What do you want there?" She cried in the evenings. Everything is possible there now. Earn to live well, her son told her. And you? She turned to Donald. What about me? I'll stay with you. I'll help you. He shrugged his shoulders. What a fool. His brother laughed at him. He's a fool himself. He turned and took a swing at his brother. Katie got so tired of all the arguments that she just walked away. One day she had a seizure and was taken to the hospital. What did you get out of it? The father asked his sons. We'll apologize later, Donald said. Don't let it be too late, sighed the father and left. Katie was fine. She was on a drip, took all the pills she needed, and came home as soon as she felt better. Forgive us, Mom. Donald came up to her. She'd hugged him and stood like that for a long time. Fiona had been a quiet and calm girl all these years. She had done well at school, no complaints from her teachers. Lately, she had become interested in socializing with her brothers. What do you find so interesting with them? Her mother once asked her. I don't know, just shrugged the girl. Just don't go anywhere with them, the woman asked her. Why not? She didn't understand. Because she's too young, her mother hugged and kissed her. She didn't have any problems with Fiona at all. She thought to herself, Anthony, just as he'd said he was going to go to the city, was going to do just that. He was getting ready. Graduation was just around the corner. Donald, on the other hand, was more at home. He was studying for his exams. Fiona, hi, her brother's friends came up to her. Hi, she looked at them. She liked them. Shall we go for a walk with us? The girls called out to her. Of course, she was sure she had nothing to be afraid of with grown-up girls. Where are your brothers? The new friends asked. As it turned out later, they specifically came to the girl to find out from her everything about Anthony and Donald, but where she was then to understand it. I don't know, out walking somewhere, the girl shrugged. Off they went. First, they were just in the village, and then they went beyond it as well. There was a forest ahead. Fiona walked up to one girl and took her hand. Scared, laughed the girl. A little, she was only 9 years old. Don't be afraid. Everything will be fine. They had already entered where the big trees grew. They usually gather at the edge of the forest, one of the girls said. They'd started to make their way into the deep. I want to go home. Fiona looked at the girls. No, we'll find the boys now and then we'll all go together. I'm tired. Fiona began to moan. Don't moan, one of her friends told her. They walked out into the clearing. Someone was there. Voices could be heard. Hello everyone, came Betty, the bravest of them all. Oh, the girls are here. A strange young man turned around. And who are you? The girl looked perplexed. And I'm just who you need. He started to get up from the ground. His buddy started to do the same. Now our guys are coming here. They will show you, said Betty defiantly. And who are we? He was looming over her. The other girls stood a little further away. They didn't know what to do. Fuck you. Turned around and walked towards her friends. What? Her boyfriend grabbed her by the hair. Let go, she shouted. The girls went to her friend's rescue. Fiona saw all this. She was scared. She couldn't move. The girl shrieked and ran wherever she was going. At that moment, a terrible thing was happening in the clearing. The one who took the girl by the hair piled her on the ground and went under her skirt. When the others tried to stop him from doing it, the other one came up to them. Hey, what do you want there? He said defiantly and pushed them away. Let her go, almost crying, Catherine said. Aha, found fools. The comrade grabbed one that was closer. Ah, screamed throughout the forest the girl. Anthony and Donald at this moment appeared in the clearing, and with them another 5 friends. Who are you? What do you want? Grabbed the guy who was already lying on Betty. He quickly stood up and grabbed him by the chest. The other girl was freed too. They ran away, and a fight broke out between the guys. They fought to the death. One of the strangers pulled out a knife. Donald, his brother shouted, but it was too late. He was stabbed in the side. The boys all pounced on the assailants, and when it was over, Donald was unconscious on the ground, and the attackers had fled into the woods. Cowards, Anthony looked at them. He tried to lift his brother, but he couldn't do it. Is he breathing? The boys asked. I think so. The boy listened to his breathing and felt his brother's pulse. At this time, the girls, who were in shock, ran to the village. They didn't know where Fiona was, so they wanted to check if she was home or not. When they were already at the gate, They didn't dare to knock or enter. What if she's not there? Catherine looked with frightened eyes. Why did we drag her there in the first place? Began to repent Betty. At this moment from the conversation heard Katie. She came out of the house. What happened to you girls? She could see that everyone was scared. Aunt Kathy, forgive us. The girls began to cry. What are you saying? The woman felt her head start to hurt. Fiona, Catherine stopped talking. What Fiona? Where is she? Her hands began to shake and twitch. We do not know. We thought she ran home, sobbed the girl. Jesus came back into the house, threw on a scarf and put on Katie's shoes. What happened? Trevor came out to her. Fiona is missing, began to cry woman. Quick, we need to look for her. He got ready too. All together, including Georgia, they rushed towards the woods. They didn't go a few meters when they saw Anthony and company. They were carrying someone in their arms. Donald. His mother fell to her knees in front of him. Mom, those scumbags stabbed him, Anthony said quickly. What's going on? She looked up at her son. He needs to go to the hospital, said someone from behind. Quick, to the nurse's station, the mother commanded. The boys dragged him there. Katie turned his sweater back, looked. The wound wasn't big, but it was serious. She did as she had been taught. Donald was in serious condition, needed to go to the hospital. An ambulance was called. They needed to look for Fiona. She was in the same woods as the bandits. Will you stay with him? The mother asked her son. No, let's go with us. The friend suggested. The guys would be more useful in the forest. Okay, the group headed back to the place they had just returned from. Fiona was nowhere to be found. No matter how much her mother and the boys shouted, no one answered them. Oh my God, where is my daughter? Crouched down on her knees and began to sob Katie. Her head was hurting worse and worse. It felt like it was about to split in two. Mom, go home. We're on our own here. Anthony pleaded with her. You've already done everything yourself. She couldn't calm down. The search continued into the night, but there were no results. We need to go home, eat and change, Trevor said calmly. How can you say that when your daughter is missing? She screamed. Good, then we need to get a bigger group together, he understood. And just like his wife, he wanted to cry. Fiona, screamed the mother at the top of her voice. But again there was silence in response. Katie, calm down, she's probably really scared and hiding. Her husband took her by the shoulder. Leave me alone, everyone. The mother shouted again. Her husband lifted her up and carried her home. She grimaced and scratched, but he tolerated it. The boys gathered more people and went to comb the woods. When Katie had taken a sedative, she went to the nurse's station, but there was no one there. Donald had been taken away in an ambulance. Trevor, please let's go to the woods. She sat on the couch and cried. Now when the guys come back, we'll replace them. He showed her there were still a few people waiting outside. Okay, put her head down in her arms, his wife. Time passed and Fiona was still nowhere to be found. Morning came. Everyone was exhausted, but there was nothing they could do. Let's go. Trevor took his wife's hand. They searched every corner of the forest, but the girl was nowhere to be found. What did we do? Was she dead? Katie asked. Horrible images came to mind, but the woman didn't want to think about it. It couldn't be. Her husband cradled her in his arms. The search continued. The boys were screaming, looking under bushes and trees. Trevor dragged his wife home again. She felt sick. She was passing out. She needed to rest. What about you? She looked at her husband. And me back. He pointed to the woods. Good. She collapsed exhaustedly onto the bed. Katie lay staring at the ceiling. She couldn't imagine what would happen to her if her daughter was gone. What if those scumbags caught her and abused her? She covered her eyes with her hands again and started crying hard. Don't, approached her Georgia, who had just entered the house. No, she screamed. There the girls came, who were taking Donald to the hospital. The woman tried to speak softly so as not to make things worse. Where is he? What's wrong with him? She jumped out of bed. He's in the hospital. His organs have been hit. Her neighbor took her hand. I have to be with him. She snuggled into Georgia's shoulder and sobbed. Yes, of course, we'll find Fiona and go, she told her. Will we find her? Katie didn't believe it anymore. We will, the woman was sure of it. They packed up and went into the woods. Georgia had packed a large bag of provisions to feed those who were in the woods. No, Katie approached her husband. "Woman, to the operating room. Take the girl for a checkup," the doctor said. Trevor and Anthony stayed in the hallway. Anthony was in the intensive care unit. There was no way to get to him, so they just had to wait. "Your girl is all right, a little dehydration, but it is not terrible," the doctor brought her. "What about your wife?" Trevor wanted to know. "It's more complicated, suspected stroke." He was not in the operating room, so he didn't know exactly. "We'll wait," the man said. "Maybe Fiona and I can go home," the guy asked. "Okay," the father replied sadly. How much time passed, no one knew. Finally, a doctor came out of the door of the operating room. "Tell me, what's wrong with my wife?" Trevor ran up to him. "Stroke." He lowered his eyes. "The operation was successful, but the results will be later." Trevor sat down on the couch again. He saw his wife being taken to the emergency room. Her head was bandaged. The man covered his eyes with the palms of his hands and cried. Now it was necessary to wait for her to come to her senses. "It is not worth sitting here. Everyone is very tired. Go home, rest, and tomorrow, closer to the evening, be here," the nurse asked him. "What if she wakes up and I'm not here?" the man asked. No, she didn't confirm his fears. Then Trevor thought that there were children at home who were also unwell, packed up and drove there. He was very nervous. He had to hold on. "As if someone had jinxed you," Georgia told him, who had already fed Fiona and put her to bed. "Don't say that," Trevor agreed, even though he didn't believe it. They sat in the kitchen and were silent, for there was nothing to say. "I'm going to town," Anthony said. "Why?" His father didn't understand. I'm fine," Donald squeezed himself out. "Mom's awake, she's fine," he told his brother. He just nodded back. Anthony stood still and went to the dormitory where he lived. On the way, he wondered why all this was happening to them, but he couldn't think of anything to say. "Where do you disappear all day long?" his friend asked him. "My brother and mom are in the hospital here," he answered truthfully. "I see, you are good that you do not leave them," praised his neighbor. After that, nothing was usual. Anthony went to the hospital every day. He helped his mother to get up. They took a little walk. Then he would go to his mother. She needed to be fed. He took care of her as best he could. Sometimes his father and Fiona came. They too did everything they could to get their relatives healed and home soon. Finally, the doctor said they could both be taken away. Only Donald mustn't do anything heavy and Kathy mustn't worry or it would be worse than it is now. Kathy, Trevor, Donald and Fiona drove back to the village and Anthony stayed behind to study. Nothing could be done. Her husband sat down next to her. "All right, we must, so we must," she said and stood up. Donald was getting very upset about this. No, not because his brother was going into the army, but because they wouldn't take him there. Why, yes, he's a little sick, but he went to school with everyone else, did everything together, and now, like going to war, so Anthony did and he didn't. The day came when they had to gather their friends. The weather was beautiful outside, so they decided to gather outside. Tables were set out, which Georgia along with Katie set up. The guys came over, each wishing something for their friend. That's it, enough with the admonishment. Anthony was tired of it. He had just recently met a girl. He wanted so much to confess his feelings, but he kept silent, thinking that he would come back, then everything would start to spin. "Son, right?" his mother told him. Of course, he promised. The parties lasted till the night. The friends did not want to leave. The girls were crying. Trevor watched it all from the gate. He didn't realize how time had passed so quickly. Not long ago, his children had been little. They didn't bring any trouble. Katie was normal. And now, one son is leaving to serve. His wife is not well with her head. What is this, old age? "Dad, what are you standing there for?" Anthony called out to him. "I'm coming." He broke away from the pole and sat down with everyone at the table. "It's late, boys, it's getting late. We should split up." His mother saw that Donald wasn't himself again. "Tomorrow, I'll wait for everyone at the station," shouted Anthony. At night, the boy couldn't sleep. He heard that it was scary where he was going. Different thoughts came into his head. "Son, wake up." His mom woke him up in the morning. "Yeah, now." He opened his eyes. Katie was preparing his bag for the road. Trevor was supervising the process. Anthony washed up, dressed, and ready to go to the station. "Hey," the girls were already there. Friends were pulling up. Anthony climbed into the cabin. One of the guys went with him to walk him straight to the station. And you and me, the girls got into the seats too. Goodbye. Take care of yourself. Hug your son, mother. Good luck. Shook his father's hand. He held back tears. Goodbye, everyone. Do not remember and write. For the last time, waved the guy from the bus window. They drove on. Everyone was silent. The guy looked out the window as if he wanted to memorize how beautiful it was here. Tears stood in his eyes, but it could not be shown to anyone. The son left. The mother sat at home at the table. She did not understand how she would survive parting with him. Shall we go to George's? Her husband came up to her. Let's go, she stood up. The neighbor was always happy to see them. She set the table as she usually did, and they sat down to talk. How's your health? The woman asked Katie. I'm fine, Kathy shrugged. But her husband and Georgia noticed that she was starting to act a little differently. Good. They didn't bring it up again. After a brief sit-down, the husband and wife went home. Kathy sat back in her seat at the table. For some reason lately, it was the one she had been occupying, and she could sit there for hours. Where are Donald and Fiona? She turned to her husband. I don't know, out somewhere, Trevor shrugged. I'm worried about her. Why is she always walking with him? The woman spoke her concerns. On the other hand, it's a good thing. Trevor tried to reassure her. They heard some rumbling outside the window. What's that? Katie looked out. I don't know. Can't you see it? Her husband asked her. Not yet. The woman remembered what Donald had told her about the motorcycle. She got up from her seat. Let's go. Trevor took her hand. They went outside the gate just as Donald pulled up there on his motorcycle, Fiona sitting behind. Did you buy it after all? The man was examining the iron horse. Yes, I can ride it around the village now, the boy said proudly. Oh, son, be careful. His mother came up to him. It's all right, he hugged her. Where are you going? She looked at her daughter. Mom, why can't I go? Fiona resented not being allowed to socialize with her brother. Okay, just please be careful, she kissed the girl. The motorcycle started again and the young people sped off into the distance. What do you think? She looked up at her husband. I don't know, he shrugged. Time passed. Anthony wrote letters. His father, when he received them at the post office, read them to his wife first. He was just afraid that his son would write something exciting and Kathy would immediately feel bad. Look, another letter. He came home. The woman smiled. She waited every day to hear from her son. Her husband would read it aloud, omitting some details, and then they would write a reply together. One day that dreaded letter arrived. Anthony wrote that he was going to a hot spot. His father didn't understand why he had made that decision, but there was nothing he could do. Naturally, he didn't say anything to Kathy. He himself first wrote a reply with his wife, and then from himself. I'll go to the post office and mail it. He showed her the envelope. Good, she nodded and smiled. Trevor decided not to tell Donald about his brother either, so he wouldn't blab. On the way back, he stopped by George's. Hey, why are you alone? She wondered. Needing to talk, he sat down at the table. Okay, what's up? She sat down too. Anthony texted, says he's going to a hot spot. The woman was the only person he told about it. Oh, really? She put her hand over her mouth. I don't understand it myself. Kathy didn't say anything, and you don't say anything. He pressed a finger to his lips. Of course, she nodded. They sat for a while longer, discussed the latest news, and Trevor went home. Father, Anthony's friends are calling us to go for a ride, Donald shouted from a distance. Are you sure you can handle it? Dad got worried. Surely you've seen me ride? Just Ace? He cocked his head. Fiona, why don't you stay home? The man insisted. No, it'll be so interesting. She took a firmer hold of her brother. Okay, just don't tell Mom later, Trevor whispered. The boys left, and he went into the house. Who were you talking to? Katie was sitting in her seat. Let's go to bed, he called his wife. It's so early, she looked at her watch. It's okay. He took her hand and led her to the bedroom. They lay down, talked for a long time, and soon fell asleep. Donald and Fiona met the boys at the edge of the village. Only 4 of them had motorcycles. They were going to go to the track and compete. Who's first? One of the boys asked. Me. Donald raised his hand. Good, then I'll go with you, the friends chimed in. Dibs on me, Fiona asked her brother. No, it's gonna be really fast, he told her off. The boys got off the gas and started off, running parallel to each other. Donald won because he was really going fast. Oh, you're good, said the one he was competing with and shook his hand. I can't, Donald shook his rival's hand. Then one pair and the other took turns riding. Each time someone won, and then the winners competed. There were only two left, the ones who rode the fastest. Donald was one of them. Cheer, he shouted to his friends. Everyone hooted, and the boys got on their horses and rode into the wind. Donald, you did well, one of the girls ran up to him. Fiona stood aside, resentful of her brother. Bringing her here and not paying attention, she turned away from everyone. Sis, what's wrong? Her brother came up to her. Nothing, not even once, did not take me for a ride with the wind on the asphalt, all around the village. In the village, she did not turn around. Sit down, now I'll roll, like an honorary circle of the winner. He looked back. The friends were already parting. Really, she looked at him. Sure enough, he went to his bike, got on it. Fiona nestled in the back. She'd hugged her brother tightly as before. Where are you going? The other friends were surprised. I'm taking my little sister for a ride, he waved at them. He accelerated, said something to Fiona, and they sped down the asphalt. Now there were no bumps or bumps. Everything was smooth. Not a few seconds after they pulled away, a KMAZ showed up ahead. The friends saw Donald start to wiggle. What happened to him? Perhaps startled by the big oncoming car, probably he wanted to turn around. A bang, a thud, and a scream, and then silence. Over there. After a little stupor, those who were watching all this shouted. The boys rushed in, but there was nothing they could do. Donald was lying in an unnatural pose on the road, Fiona in the other direction on the grass. The girl's still alive, shouted the KMA's driver. He radioed for an ambulance. The ambulance had to wait for some time. Fiona was alive. She was very badly bruised, but she was breathing, unlike her brother. Trevor and Katie had long been asleep when the windows and the door began to bang. Who is it? The man woke up. He went to the door, opened it, and there was a bunch of people almost knocking him off his feet. Uncle Trevor, Donald, Fiona. They shouted at each other. Calm down, will you explain what happened? He looked up with dazed eyes. Donald had crashed. Fiona was alive. She was in hospital. At that moment, the wife appeared on the doorstep, and as soon as she heard that, she fainted. Get out, Trevor shouted at the young people. Katie, he ran to his wife. He lifted her in his arms and put her on the sofa and went to get someone to look after his wife while he was away, calling for Georgia. What again? He woke her up too. They say Donald crashed his motorcycle with Fiona, he said quietly. What? The neighbor's eyes bulged. I don't know what's wrong with them, but Katie heard it all, and she's not feeling well now. He rushed her. When Georgia left for Trevor and Katie's house, Trevor ran to the village hall to make a call. The ambulance didn't arrive quickly. Katie never recovered. She was taken away. Trevor went with her. At the hospital, he reliably learned that his son was no longer alive and his daughter was in intensive care, in extremely serious condition. He had not been told anything about his wife yet. Trevor was sitting in the corridor. He was crying. The doctor came and sat down next to him. I think your wife has gotten worse, but she's holding on. Maybe she doesn't believe it yet, he said. Yeah, Trevor shook his head. You can pick her up tomorrow morning. Here are the pills. Give them to her at the funeral. The doctor handed Trevor a packet. Thank you. He didn't know what else to say. I hope everything will be okay. The medic got up and walked down the hall. Trevor slept right there in the hallway on the couch. In the morning, he walked in on Katie. She was looking at him with eyes that were so scary. Where's Donald? She asked him in the voice she used to speak to him before his illness. In the morgue, her husband didn't lie. Why him? She cried. Trevor unsealed the packet and gave it to his wife. She obediently drank the pill. And Fiona? She couldn't hold back the tears. She's in the hospital. She's doing fine. Her husband lied. They spent some more time in the hospital and then took their son's body and drove to the village. After the pills the doctor had given Trevor, Katie was generally immobile. She was doing something. but she was like a doll. No emotion, nothing at all. The funeral was quiet. The mother sat by her son's coffin and cried. Everyone felt sorry for her. Georgia didn't understand how she hadn't gone mad herself. This had happened. "We need to go to the hospital, to Fiona," Trevor said to the neighbor when everything settled down. "Yeah, you go and I'll stay with Katie," she told him. Trevor did his best, but Fiona had outlived her brother by only 8 days. He sat and cried and didn't know what to do. Then the man made a strong-willed decision. He took his daughter's body, arranged for cremation, paid the money. He drove to the village with a small vessel containing Fiona's ashes. It he had dug up for his son in the cemetery. "Back already?" Georgia asked him. "Yes, I have good news for you," said the man, making a happy face. "And what's that?" Kathy, when she wasn't taking pills, was adequate. "Fiona has been taken to the clinic to recover there," he smiled. "That's good. Let the girl get better," Katie said. "Do they send children without their parents?" Georgia questioned. "She's not a child. She's 12 years old." Trevor put his finger to her lips to keep her quiet. "Then I see," nodded the neighbor. She didn't know the truth yet. They all sat together. The father's heart was breaking with grief, and he couldn't even speak. In the evening, when he went to see the neighbor off, he told her everything. She looked at him with big eyes. "Trevor, where have you been?" Katie looked at him. She wasn't the same. "Out in the yard," he told her. And a month later, the thing that everyone had been dreading happened. Trevor was at work. A man came up to him. He said there was a mailman waiting for him outside. "What?" He came out. "I'm sorry." He put a telegram in his hands. His son was being taken to the motherland in a zinc coffin. "No." He fell to his knees, then got up and caught up with the man. "Please don't tell anyone. My wife will go crazy if she finds out," he begged him. "I'm not supposed to," the man replied. "What is it?" A comrade came up to him. "Nothing." He folded up the paper and put it in his pocket. Georgia, grief, he ran into her house without even knocking. "What again?" She was no longer surprised. "Anthony." Trevor couldn't get any further. "No way." She looked out the window. "Tomorrow I'll go to town for the body," he said. She supported him in everything. She said she'd do whatever he said. Trevor drove into town, arranged a car, said he needed to move building materials, wanted to make an outbuilding in the village. We agreed on a price. He came to the military enlistment office. There he was offered that the funeral would be at the expense of the state with a guard of honor, but the man refused. "You see, I have such a situation," he told them. "He wants to bury his son quietly." "Well, that's your business," the man in uniform told him. He threw a tarp over the coffin, told the driver that he had loaded everything, and they drove off. "Why at night?" The man behind the wheel didn't understand. "It just happened," Trevor shrugged. They arrived at his house. The streets were deserted, and only Georgia stood at her gate watching to make sure no one went in. 2 local backwoodsmen were prepared to help the man. They sprang out of the back alley and dragged the coffin over to the fence. Here, Georgia gave them some more. "That's it. Thanks. Go inside." He waved her off. He cleaned the toilet and shoved the coffin into the cesspool. It didn't sink, so Trevor had to dig it even deeper. By morning, he was exhausted, but he was done. The toilet was still there, nothing inside. "Yo, you smell?" Katie said when he came back to her. "I don't know." He pretended to sniff his hands. "We've got to get the bath heated." His wife got up and went into the kitchen. Trevor did as she wanted. They washed up and came back into the house. "Do you know why Anthony doesn't write for so long, and there are no letters from Fiona?" Katie asked her husband. "He'll definitely come tomorrow," Trevor said. He realized that this was his puncture. When Kathy was busy, he would sit in the other room and write. Then he'd go outside and pretend to get something out of a drawer. And then he and his wife would read together. "Oh, Trevor, what have we done? A mother should know everything about her children," Georgia told him. "I'll take her away from here," the man said. The two of them lived together, but Trevor started drinking because he couldn't bear it all. At some point, he couldn't take it anymore, went to the barn and hanged himself there. And in the morning, when Katie couldn't find him, she went out into the yard and the barn doors were open. She looked in and passed out. "I noticed it late when she was on the ground, and I ran out and there was this picture," Georgia said. "Wow," the story. Steve was sitting there looking at her. We took Katie to the hospital and buried Trevor. She herself left there to live here so there wouldn't be too many questions. She cried with tears already visible. Where is Kathy now? Steve asked her. She was in the clinic for a couple of months, and then she was transferred to a specialized center, the old lady answered. I see there was a family and then there wasn't. Steve shook his head. He looked out the window. It was getting light. He realized he'd been here all night. Okay, I'm going to go. He got up. I'm not afraid to die now. She looked at the man. Come on, you'll live a long time. He shook her hand and left. He decided to get home on foot. It would be time to think it over. He walked along the road and could not imagine how such a fate could be for people. It was impossible in his head. He reached home in the village quickly. In an hour there was a bus to the city. He wanted to take it. I went to the station, bought a ticket and went. Listen, it's me, he shouted from the doorstep. What are you doing up so early? She rolled over onto her other side. But when her husband began to tell her what he'd learned tonight, she was wide awake. She sat up in bed and blinked. What do you think? He asked her. We should call the police and give the guy a proper burial, she said. I was thinking the same thing, looked at Steve's watch. The husband and wife had been out of the house since morning. They were in a hurry to get to the station. Hello, we're here about the coffin that was found in the sinkhole, said Steve to the officer on duty. Come on in, he pointed them in the right direction. They went into the investigator's office and told him everything they knew. He sat there, his face growing more and more drawn out. Do you believe it? He asked. Well, how not to believe if all the evidence is in the face? Now it was Steve's turn to be surprised. All the documents were filled out. They agreed that the motorcade would be organized. They also agreed on the time. What now? Steve and Allison came out of the department. I want to find Kathy. The man looked at his wife. Oh, where do we start? She didn't understand. The hospital. He caught the car and they drove off. Hello, I'd like to find out any information about Kathy. He approached the front desk. Right away, the girl started poking around on the computer. Yes, here, who are you? She stared at the couple. I'm a brother, stepbrother, the man added. Okay. She told them what clinic she was in. Steve and Allison drove to the mental health clinic. They walked up to the gate. They had to fill out a bunch of paperwork to get in. They were greeted by the doctor. Steve explained to him that he had not seen his sister for a long time. She had disappeared somewhere, but now he found her. The doctor understood him, turned and showed him the direction. She always sits by the window, reading something on paper, the doctor said. Okay, thank you. They went that way, where the man directed them. Kathy was indeed sitting by the window. There were several envelopes lying on the windowsill. They were so tattered you could tell they were more than 1 year old and were constantly being opened. Kathy, the man called out to her gently. Are you for me? She turned around, looking indifferent. Yes, he nodded. What did you want? She stood up and walked over to them. Tomorrow your son will be buried in the village. Will you come with us? He asked her. My son is alive here. He writes letters to me every week, she showed to the strangers. So you don't want to? Stiva realized that it was all useless. No, she shook her head, went and sat back in her seat. Stiva and Allison realized there was nothing more for them to do here. They walked towards the exit. Trevor, they heard Katie's voice. What? The man turned around. Is it true? She asked Steve, even though she thought it was her husband Trevor. Yes, he nodded. Good. Pick me up from the hospital and I'll come with you. After saying that, she went somewhere down the corridor. Doctor, her son will be buried tomorrow. Can we take her? Steve asked the man. You know, I can't give such permission. Only if by our car and with nurses. He couldn't help but let the woman go to her son. Okay, even that would be fine, nodded the man. Why would you want to do that? Allison asked her husband. At least let him see for the last time that all her children were together. He himself didn't know why Steva would do that. Fine, do as you please, she agreed. The next day, the car from the hospital and an ordinary car drove to the very village where Kathy had once lived. They headed straight for the cemetery. This way, Steve showed her. They came to the Allison place where Kathy's son and daughter were buried, during which time the girl had also been given a memorial. Donald Phenom, she sat down on the bench. Recognized it, Allison whispered to her husband. Yes, he nodded. And after that, the honor guard lined up. A wooden cross with Anthony's picture on it was made. But the woman sat still. Only when the shots rang out did she flinch. "Are you all right?" the man asked her. "Yes, I need to get home in case a letter arrives and I'm not there." She looked up at Steve. "Okay." He looked at the nurses. They got up and put her in the car. "Goodbye." The woman waved to them from the window. "Goodbye." Steve stood and watched with his wife as the car drove away. "Poor woman, did she think her life would turn out this way?" cried Allison. "No one knows what might happen next." Steve turned to her. He saw Grandma Georgia approaching them. "Hello," he shouted to her. Agassi, she walked over to the fresh grave and knelt down. "Is that the neighbor?" Allison guessed. Yes, he walked in her direction. "Did you bring Katie in?" Granny asked. "I wanted her to see her children," Steve admitted. "And what, you think she was relieved?" She looked up at him. "I don't know, maybe." He took his wife's hand and they went to their new unfinished house. "What are we going to do?" Allison turned to him. "Move on." They were already approaching the gate. The woman didn't want to go into the yard. "And let's call a priest. He will sanctify everything here," suggested the husband. "That's a good idea." Allison hugged him. So they did. And when the neighbors saw all these rituals, they decided to do the same. For a long time, there was gossip in the village about the coffin Steve had found. But years later, everything is forgotten. Stiva and Allison live happily in this house. Children come to visit them. They don't know the story that happened to them, but perhaps someday they will be told. Georgia died 6 months after all this. Stiva personally organized her funeral, and Allison helped him. "May you do well there," crossed the man at the grave of Katie and Trevor's children. "Let's go," Allison called out to him. They went home and thought no more about it.
Amanda looked up. She raised her head, trying to look up to the roof of the 16-story building. She had to squint all the time. Heavy drops of cold fall rain were falling from the sky. The girl was already completely soaked and cold. At least she should have been, because she had left the house in what she was wearing: shorts and a long, stretched t-shirt. And it's October outside. People are already wearing jackets and bouncing around, and then there's that nasty rain. But Amanda felt almost nothing physically right now. All of her senses were overshadowed by heartache. So much so that she didn't even want to live. What was there to live for? What was ahead of her now but shame and a meaningless, miserable existence? Not only that she had sealed her fate, but she would ruin her family's life if she stayed with them. No, it would be better to disappear from this world altogether, Amanda said. That's why she'd come to the only high-rise in the neighborhood. The other houses were two low Khrushchev 5-story buildings. And the new building, a pleasant soft blue color, towered above them like an ornate candle. The best place could not be thought of. This frightening yet life-saving thought came to Amanda suddenly. She was home alone. Her younger brothers were at school, her father and stepmother at work. Rain drummed against the window, and Amanda sat on her bed with her arms wrapped around her knees and rocked. She seemed to cry when no one was home. The girl could afford to let her feelings come out. Sometimes it got a little easier, but not now, because soon everyone would know everything. She couldn't hide it from her family forever. Then what would she do? No one would support Amanda. They won't kick her out of the house, of course, but they'll blame her all the time. Because she's in trouble. Of course, life will be a never-ending nightmare. And it's all her fault, no one else's. I should have been so stupid. Amanda had never been very close to her father. He seemed to love her, his only daughter, but to talk to his child, to ask how she was doing. No, that never happened. Her father was interested in Amanda's grades, her household needs, sometimes her health. And that was it. The other thing is the sons, the common children with the new wife, Amanda's younger brothers. That's where the father went fishing with them and made jokes. What about the stepmother? When she first married her father, she seemed sympathetic to Amanda. But then she had children of her own, boys who were 1.5 years old. And the girl immediately felt superfluous, like a fifth wheel on a cart. No, her stepmother didn't starve her and didn't bog her down with work, as in old fairy tales, but she didn't give her any warmth. She performed her duties to bring up her stepdaughter as an unloved, but necessary work. That's all. Amanda might not have noticed her parents' coldness toward herself, but she saw how they treated Michael and Timothy, and that sometimes made her hurt and resentful. And lonely. Well, what did you want? Amanda was once enlightened by her neighbor in the stairwell, Aunt Lucy. The girl then studied in the 8th grade and complained to her acquaintance that none of her parents could not come to her on a school holiday. For stepmother, you are a stranger. And your father. Men, they love children from their favorite women. And the woman he loves is his current wife. What about Mom? Amanda took offense to Mom. Tatiana is his past Aunt Lucy sighed heavily. She was once friends with Amanda's mother. Your stepmother is your real stepmother. That's the conclusion to draw. Tears sprang from Amanda's eyes again at the memory of her dearest person. How she missed her mom right now. Mom would definitely have supported her daughter in a difficult situation if she had been there for her. Amanda wouldn't be afraid of anything at that moment. Together they would definitely think of something. Mom never scolded Amanda. If the girl was wrong, she would calmly point out her mistakes and explain at length, in detail, with examples, telling her why it was necessary to act this way and not that way. At that moment, Amanda felt so happy, so loved. Mom was the closest and dearest person for the girl. Her smile was as warm as the sun, and her tender hands seemed to protect her from all troubles and misfortunes. Once Amanda thought her mom was eternal, strong, reliable, and vulnerable. How wrong she was. The tragedy happened when the girl was in the 1st grade. Amanda, as always, came home after school, heated food from the refrigerator, had lunch, did her homework. Her mom was about to come home from work, followed by her dad. A cozy evening with the family lay ahead. Mom would probably come back with buns from the factory canteen. They're so fluffy, so fragrant. Adult and child will drink tea together and talk about everything in the world. Amanda will tell her parents how her teacher praised her today. But it was 7, then 8, and Mom and Dad were still gone. Darkness thickened outside the window. From the street came the long howl of the wind. The February weather had gotten worse. Amanda realized something was wrong. She crawled onto the couch, piled up her pillows, and waited. She was so scared alone in an empty apartment. If only she had a little sister or a brother, it would be more fun together. Amanda asked her parents many times to give birth to someone else, but they laughed and explained that they had a small apartment, 2 rooms only. They would expand, and then they could think about it. Finally, the key turned in the lock. Amanda's heart quickened. She rushed to meet her parents. When she saw her mother, everything would become simple and not scary. Her smile, her voice always drove away fears and worries. On the doorstep stood her father alone. Amanda felt disappointed. It had better be Mom. But it was good that at least Dad had come. He was more fun and less scary. But why is he so glum? His face is literally blank. And what's that alien look in his eyes? Where's Mom? Amanda asked. And then the father told his daughter the terrible truth, which the girl could not believe for a long time afterwards. It turned out that in the factory shop, where her mother worked, there was an accident. The boiler burst. There was a fire. Not everyone was saved. Amanda's mom was among the dead. Then there were funerals, but Amanda was not taken to them, left with neighbors. They thought that she was too young for such shocks. It was as if the girl had been turned off. For several years she could not smile and almost did not speak. She studied, ate, went to school, even it seems, played with her friends. But she did everything by inertia, machine-like. Amanda herself still remembered her feelings well. It seemed to her that she was in an unreal imaginary world, where everything was not real. That's why she didn't feel anything, a protective reaction of her body. I guess her father was doing the best he could to take care of his daughter, but he wasn't very good at it. Dad couldn't cook, but he was good at frying potatoes. He couldn't braid Amanda's hair either. Honestly, he tried. But they came out sloppy and smelly. In the end, Amanda had to learn to do a lot of things on her own. A kind neighbor, Aunt Lucy, her mother's friend, told her something and she did it herself. Domestic problems distracted Amanda a little and even relieved her condition. Fatigue drowned out the heartache, and yet the girl was very longing. So long that it is impossible to express in words. At night she cried quietly into her pillow, so as not to disturb her father. He promised to take her to a doctor if she didn't come to her senses. But Amanda didn't want to see a doctor, so she put up with it. Gradually, life fell into a familiar pattern. It became less pleasant, less cozy and bright. But there was still room for joy and pleasure in her life. Amanda had desires, dreams, and feelings. It was as if she was revitalized, strengthened, made stronger. And then, 2 years after the tragic events, Amber, the stepmother, appeared in the house. Her father worked as a driver at the bakery, delivering products to stores and stores, sometimes taking his daughter on trips. Amanda loved sitting in the high cab, looking down on the cars. What did it smell like in there? The aroma of fresh baked goods was unmatched. Amber worked as a clerk at one of the outlets her father operated. That's how they met. At first, Amber seemed like a kind, warm-hearted woman, smiling, attentive homemaker. What about her cooking? Oh my God! Pancakes, pies, borscht. Amanda learned a lot from her. The girl was happy. Of course, no one could replace her mother, but a woman's hand in their house was definitely lacking. True, the neighbor Lucy from the very beginning was inclined to Amber cool, to put it mildly. Amanda noticed this dislike of her mom's friend and didn't understand the reason. Then Michael was born. Amanda was happy. She had once dreamed of a brother. The girl helped Amber with everything. Her big sister was a joy to be around, but her stepmother's attitude toward her help had changed. She began to be annoyed by things that before she did not even pay attention to. Why buy old clothes? Do you still have a closet full? Amber reprimanded her spouse. Michael needs a new fall suit. He's growing up fast. Why didn't your daughter do the dishes? What am I, the maid, cleaning up after all of you? I have a baby in my arms. I don't have time. The stepmother would get angry another time, and so on. It got to the point where Amanda tried to avoid seeing the woman again, so as not to cause a new outburst of irritation and aggression. But it didn't help. Amber always found something to pick on. And it was hard not to have contact in a cramped 2-room apartment. Stepmother, father, and baby lived in the living room. Amanda had her own tiny but cozy and, most importantly, separate room. Here the girl felt in relative peace and safety. Only a year after Michael's appearance in the family was born another child, Tamati, and the eldest son was immediately moved into the nursery to Amanda. Now she had to neighbor with a 1.5-year-old baby, who invariably threw her textbooks and notebooks and cried a lot at night. But Amanda was not allowed to complain. Her father would support her stepmother, and she would be completely on her son's side. So she had to bear it. Moreover, sooner or later you get used to everything. When Tamati grew up a little, he was also moved into the nursery. The parents bought the boys bunk beds, which occupied the entire wall. Along the other wall stood Amanda's sofa. There was a desk under the window. There was no room for anything else in the room. Cramped but not cramped, Amber said of the nursery. She also dreamed of the time when Amanda would finally grow up and move away, either to study in another city or get married. I don't think we'll be able to get a bigger apartment, Amber reasoned. Times are hard, but Amanda's already a bride, and when she leaves, the place will be free, and the boys will have more room. And so will we. These dreams of her stepmother, spoken aloud, made the girl feel even more unnecessary and unloved. And the father? He did not even object to his wife, as if he too thought that Amanda's presence alone prevented everyone from living. Amanda finished 9 grades and entered a school to become a pastry chef. She wanted to become independent sooner, to get a job, rent an apartment, and move away from her family, who considered her a burden. Amanda had a group of wonderful girls. She immediately made friends with Lucy, a small, cheerful, carefree, and completely good-natured girl. It was easy and pleasant to communicate with her. Once Amanda had a person with whom she could share her worries. Emily pitied her friend, scolded her stepmother, and very often invited Amanda to her house. Emily lived in a spacious apartment with her grandmother. The girl had never seen her father, and her mother was building a personal life somewhere on the side. In some ways, the fates of girlfriends were similar. Both of them did not know parental love. But Emily was luckier. She had a caring grandmother who did not care about her granddaughter. At the beginning of summer was Emily's birthday, her coming of age, and the girl decided to celebrate not anywhere, but in a nightclub. I've never been to such a place before. Emily's eyes were burning with impatience. I'm 18, and I've never been to a club before. Neither have I, Amanda admitted. This is ridiculous. We need to fix this right now. And so the girls found themselves in a nightclub. All that music, the ear-splitting bass, the crowd of young people on the dance floor. The girls were a little confused at first. I wanted to go home right away, Amanda admitted, but Emily held her back. Wait, we haven't understood anything yet. What if we like it? Emily firmly dragged her friend to a vacant table. I think they ordered a pizza and a Coke. They didn't get drinks. Not you, or I have never had a drink before, Amanda said reasonably. I don't know what it'll do to us. And we're all alone here, Emily agreed. The girls went to the dance floor. The cheerful Emily blended right in with the crowd. She caught the rhythm and began to dance naturally and harmoniously. But Amanda felt constrained and awkward, tried to make some movements with her hands and feet, but seemed ridiculous to herself. It was good that it was dark, noisy and crowded. Hardly anyone paid attention to her. But Amanda was wrong. In fact, James was already following her. Only the girl didn't even realize it at the time. He was attracted by Amanda's differentness from the others. The girls from the club are all the same. Nothing new, nothing interesting. I've already looked at all of them. And then suddenly this modest and beautiful, incredibly slender, long-legged, a natural beauty. But how could I pass her up? James approached Amanda's table when she was alone. Emily was on the dance floor, oblivious to the world and looking very happy. Amanda, on the other hand, was still kind of uncomfortable, awkward, uncomfortable, but she didn't want to ruin her friend's party. Let her have fun. Birthday girl. Amanda sat at the table, looking at the people dancing. It was interesting to look at the outfits and hairstyles of the girls, the faces of the guys. There was a lot of people here, both green school children and people of almost parental age. Excuse me, can I sit down? Amanda heard. She shifted her gaze to the person speaking. It was a handsome guy in a tight black t-shirt, emphasizing the relief of muscles and obviously not cheap jeans. The young man was looking directly at Amanda and smiling openly. Do you mind if I sit down? The stranger repeated his question. No, of course not, Amanda said. Good. The guy smiled even wider and sat down directly opposite Emily's seat. My name is James. I've been watching you for a long time. I thought I'd introduce myself. Amanda was embarrassed. She had no experience with the opposite sex. At school, boys didn't pay much attention to Amanda. They chose more colorful and risky girls. And Amanda was always quiet, modest. She was afraid to say an extra word. And in college, they didn't have any guys in their group. And now a young man wants to meet her. He likes her. How is that possible? And the guy's handsome, confident, and apparently not poor. Amanda had no idea how to talk to him, although she really wanted to. But James acted like they'd known each other forever, talking about things, joking, complimenting Amanda. And soon the girl's shyness was gone. Amanda didn't notice how she got involved in the conversation. She laughed at the jokes of her charming interlocutor, answered his questions, listened to stories from James's cheerful student life. The guy studied at the best university in the city at a prestigious law school. He was also involved in sports. He was a member of the university volleyball team. Lived with his parents in an apartment in the city center. He worked part-time at a pizzeria as a cook's assistant and drove his own car. Amanda stared into his cheerful eyes of an amazing emerald hue and felt like she was falling in love, for the first time in her life. A racing heartbeat, lightheadedness, a desire to be as close to him as possible. Weren't those the signs of falling in love? James was drawn to Amanda, too. The girl could feel it and see it in his interested gaze. The guy was showering her with compliments. Amanda couldn't believe her happiness. And she was desperately afraid to disappoint her new acquaintance, to say something wrong or do something. In fact, she was terrified of pushing James away. Oh, it's your friend. It wasn't Emily who came back to the table. It was Amanda. She'd already forgotten that she'd come to the nightclub with a friend. It seemed that the perceptive Emily understood everything from her friend's eyes. James, the guy, introduced himself and immediately stood up, giving way to the girl. Wow, what a gallant, a real gentleman. Emily marveled. I'm actually on my way out. She looked at Amanda questioningly. She understood her friend's look. Emily wondered if she was the third extra, asking if it was time for her to leave. Amanda didn't know what to say to her friend. On the one hand, she didn't want to leave James to be here alone with him. What could be more wonderful? On the other hand, it wasn't an easy decision to make, because, well, it was just scary. Honestly, this was the first time Amanda was seeing this man. What would James think of her if she agreed to be alone with a guy she didn't even know? And James understood the girl's hesitation. Amazing sensitivity. I could drive you both home, he offered. only on the condition that Amanda leave me her phone number." The girl smiled. He would drive them both. That's a whole different matter. And James also asks for her phone number. But of course she will gladly give him those numbers. James' car was parked in the wide parking lot in front of the club. A black Chevrolet Cruze, not an expensive foreign car, but quite a nice car for a young guy. Amanda rejoiced. Lucky James wasn't rich. The guy drove the girls to Emily's house. Tonight Amanda had a sleepover at her friend's house. The parents had been warned about it in advance. Emily went out first. For a moment Amanda and James were left alone in the cabin. The guy took advantage of this and took Amanda's palm in his hand and brought it to his lips. It was a very gallant kiss that filled Amanda's heart with light and warmth. "I'll be sure to call you tomorrow," James said. Amanda will be waiting for him to leave. Emily pounced on her friend with questions. She was curious to know how Amanda had gotten her hands on the handsome man. "I don't know," Amanda shrugged. "He picked me somehow." "Lucky you," Emily sighed. "I was making eyes at a guy on the dance floor, but he didn't even pay attention to me." "You'll get there," Amanda smiled. And then she added, "I'm just afraid he won't call me back." "He will," she said confidently. "The way he was looking at you. If someone looked at me like that, I'd be so happy." Emily was right. James did call back the next morning and invited Amanda to the movies. It was the opening night of another big superhero blockbuster. And there, in the darkness of the auditorium, James kissed Amanda for the first time. The girl even felt dizzy. She didn't know how to behave in such a situation. It was her first kiss. James seemed to realize that. "What about you? Were you seeing anyone else before me?" he asked, pulling back slightly and looking into Amanda's eyes. "No," she said, embarrassed. "Well, that's it." Now James would realize how ridiculous and worthless she was. She was almost 18, and she hadn't even been on a real date yet. There must be something wrong with her. Who would want her like that? But to Amanda's surprise, the negative answer pleased James. His eyes shone with joy. A wide smile lit up his face. He suddenly put his arms around Amanda gently and pulled her close to him. The girl felt his heart beating and melted with happiness. Some events were unfolding on the screen, but the meaning of the movie kept slipping away from Amanda. He was there. James put his arm around her shoulders, stroked her hair from time to time, and sometimes he looked at her silently and smiled at her. They often met, went to cafes and movies, went on rides, just wandered around the picturesque streets and neighborhoods. Sometimes James would take Amanda out of town. He knew so much about so many things. Young people then went to the waterfalls, then to the mountain with flowering plants. It turns out that in the vicinity of his hometown, a lot of interesting and beautiful. And Amanda had no idea. "You have a boyfriend now." "And I'm still alone," Emily envied her friend a little. "You'll have a boyfriend, too," Amanda replied. "Maybe, but when? You have a boyfriend now, and I'm still alone, with no one to go out with." So Amanda was a little embarrassed to tell her friend about her meetings with James, each of which turned into a magical adventure. Why would she want to hurt Emily's feelings? Happiness loves silence. Amanda didn't know where she'd first heard that beautiful expression, but she thought they were very wise words. Amanda finally felt loved. It turned out to be an incredibly pleasant feeling. James took care of her, opening the car door in front of her, giving her something to eat all the time. And if it got chilly, he took off his jacket and threw it over Amanda's shoulders. He was so sensitive, so attentive. James seemed to pick up on any change in the girl's mood and anticipate her desires. Love, support, attention. Amanda lacked it in her family. And here comes a guy who enveloped her with warmth, like a cotton blanket. Of course, James quickly became for her the most native and close person. Sometimes at night in bed, Amanda couldn't sleep and thought about how she had lived without James. Too bad James was a very busy young man. School, work, and his grandmother in the village, to whom he often traveled with groceries. The guy couldn't spend as much time with Amanda as she would have liked. By the way, he often regretted it out loud. "Baby, I want to hold you in my arms and hold you 24 hours a day. You are so amazing, but I have so much to do, my head is spinning sometimes." Amanda, lying in James's arms, understood. She felt sorry for the guy. He must be very tired, running around like a squirrel in a wheel. But he seemed to like the active life. That's good, too. Her father and stepmother didn't notice the change in Amanda's behavior. They did not see the happy glint in her eyes and thought that the girl spent a lot of time with her friend. One day, during a safety lecture, Amanda suddenly felt sick. It was early morning, the first class. The girl was groggy from the morning. But then the teacher suddenly spoke about the smell of raw fish, and Amanda felt it. Her eyes even darkened. No, she rushed for the exit. She had to make it. And Amanda did. How could she vomit? She'd never been like this before. "What's wrong with you?" Lucy came to ask. "You look so pale." "I was sent to see if you were all right." "I think I'm fine," Amanda smiled. She suddenly felt strangely weak. Even her knees trembled. "Are you pregnant by any chance?" Emily asked. "No, I'm not." Amanda shook her head negatively and suddenly thought about it. It was entirely possible. It was unlikely, of course, but not impossible. Her stomach suddenly felt cold. Cold from the sudden realization. Emily said confidently. "No," Amanda admitted. "Then take the test." "I don't know why not." "I'm afraid," Amanda admitted honestly. On the way home, she stopped by the drugstore and bought a test. Something inside her told her that the result would be positive. Amanda had almost no doubts about it, and she was right. The test showed 2 bright stripes. It was a good thing no one was home at that time. Her brothers at school, her parents at work. Amanda shakily made her way to her couch and collapsed on it. Tears rolled from her eyes. The girl could not understand her own feelings. On the one hand, her heart was overflowing with joy and tenderness. She had a baby under her heart, a very real baby. Her baby, hers and James's. What a beautiful and wonderful creature it must be. On the other hand, Amanda didn't feel ready for motherhood. She wasn't even 18 yet. She wouldn't turn 18 until next month. No profession obtained, no job. What's she going to do with a baby? She's not ready. But the baby has a father. James, on the other hand, is doing just fine. He's studying, working, even owns his own car. His parents have a big apartment. He's mentioned it many times. I'm sure there's plenty of room for everyone. So it would seem. All the conditions for the creation of a family are there. But how would James take this news? Amanda was very worried about that question. It seems that the guy sincerely loves her, gives gifts, tends to spend any free minute with her. There are not many of them in his busy life. There was only one way to test it. Amanda would always remember that evening. James had invited her for an evening stroll along the waterfront. Dusk had already fallen. The light of the lanterns gave the setting a special charm. James held Amanda's hand. They walked in silence along the parapet behind which the wide river carried its waters. Quiet, calm, majestic. There was a nice fresh breeze. The first stars appeared in the sky. I need to talk to you." Amanda decided that there was no point in waiting any longer. She had tried to tell James about their baby several times before, but she hadn't had the courage. Now he would finally find out, give her a hug, a smile, a little scolding for her indecision. And everything would be fine. About what? James was still smiling nonchalantly. He couldn't imagine what he would hear in a few seconds. "James, We're having a baby." Amanda sucked in a breath. There was a heavy pause. Amanda stared into James's eyes, trying to figure out what he was feeling right now. And she didn't see any joyful emotions on the boy's face. Finally, he sighed heavily. "Are you sure?" Yes, Amanda nodded. "Several tests have already come back positive." "What's the timing of all this?" The boy looked puzzled and upset. Seeing that look on his face, almost squeamish, was very painful for Amanda. The girl's eyes suddenly filled with tears. With a willful effort, she chased them back. "What are you going to do?" James looked at Amanda and waited for an answer. The girl shrugged her shoulders. She had hoped it would be James who would tell her what to do, reassure her and support her. But he seemed to be as confused and scared as she was. There was no trace of his usual confidence. Right before Amanda's eyes, he was transformed. The adult, all-powerful James, capable of solving any problem, disappeared. And in his place was a boy green, inexperienced, a coward. "You're pathetic, even." Amazing metamorphosis, Amanda thought. "So how do you plan to deal with it?" James repeated his question. Amanda let go of her boyfriend's hand. He didn't want a serious relationship. This naive girl was already starting to bore him. At first, her enthusiasm, her ability to enjoy the little things had attracted and mesmerized James. Amanda looked at him with such eyes that he felt strong and omnipotent. It was an interesting experience. He'd never met a girl like her before, but gradually it bored him. James was once again drawn to bright, bold beauties. He planned to break up with Amanda gradually over the next 2 weeks, without scandals or hard feelings. And then she said it. "I'm pregnant." James pulled away involuntarily, as if he wanted to run away. No, Amanda shook her head. "We have to have an abortion." James seized on the thought. Money wasn't a problem. The term was short. It would be quick and easy. "We'll go to the clinic tomorrow. I'm about to turn 18. Minors will tell their parents and they'll kill me," Amanda reminded him. "If you don't, they'll kill you," James insisted. "It's going to be noticeable soon anyway," Amanda shook her head. "I have time to think of something, but we can't let anyone find out now." "You're insane," James said. "And sneaky. From a poor family? Maybe it's a way to make money." Amanda stared at him in amazement. How ugly he looked. Could she really fall in love with someone like that? "It's not going to work," he said. "My aunt works in the court. She will make the documents. And you won't be able to prove that the child is mine. Maybe it's not mine at all." Amanda sighed heavily, turned around and walked away. Away from James and his hurtful, nasty words. The voice of the man she had recently loved with all her soul came through. "Get out of here so I don't have to see you. I'll never recognize him, do you hear me? You can't prove anything. If you try, I'll crush you." Amanda didn't doubt that James had the strength to crush her. But she wasn't going to fight him, and she didn't even want to see him now. The prince had turned out to be a coward and a scoundrel. Amanda was almost running down the embankment. The blood was pounding in her temples. An unpleasant chill spread through her body. At some point, she noticed the wary glances of passers-by and realized that her face was wet with tears. She felt an unbearable pain in her solar plexus. For a moment, she stopped thinking about the baby. Her disappointment had overshadowed her, and her soul was dark and disgusting. Had all of James's words, his reassurances, his tender glances and kisses been lies? That evening, Amanda walked about 10 kilometers home, not even noticing the distance. She tried to concentrate on her steps, seemingly counting them to distract herself from her heavy thoughts. In front of the apartment door, Amanda wiped her tears and smoothed her hair. She had to look normal, so her stepmother and father wouldn't suspect anything. It wasn't hard. They usually paid little attention to her. The stepmother was in the kitchen. The father was humming in the bathroom. Michael and Tamati were playing a console in the living room. The room was vacant. Wonderful. Amanda collapsed on the couch, turned her back to the wall, and instantly fell into a sound sleep. The morning is ancient in the evening. Tomorrow, surely she'd think of something. But Amber didn't think of tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or the week after. Amanda went to school as usual. Summer vacation wasn't over yet, but students had to attend a special block of lectures before their last course. "But what are we going to do?" Emily, the only one who knew about Amanda's situation, often asked, unless you counted James, who had probably forgotten about the whole thing like a bad dream by now. "I have no idea," the girl shrugged. "I'll figure something out." Thither time went on and still no solution was found. The morning sickness had disappeared somewhere, and Amanda sometimes now even forgot that she was carrying a child under her heart. She felt nothing at all. Sometimes the thought even crept into her head, maybe the tests are all lies, but it can't be that a pregnant woman feels completely normal, can it? What about mood swings, strange taste preferences, rabid appetite? August came to an end, September flew by. And then one gloomy, chilly October morning, Amanda realized she couldn't button her favorite and only neat jeans at the waist. Her stomach had grown, it seemed, overnight. Just like that, almost instantaneously. Amanda lifted up her shirt and scrutinized herself in the mirror. Yes, she definitely looked pregnant now. No matter how hard the girl tried, she couldn't get that belly in. Tears came to her eyes. Her head snapped up. Well, this is it. Now everyone will see. Everyone will realize what she's done, and why Amanda took so long to do anything about it. Why didn't she listen to James and go to the hospital in time? Honestly, she'd thought everything would sort itself out. Foolish and naive to believe such a thing. But the girl still hoped that the tests were wrong. or that the pregnancy would suddenly stop developing. Foolish, unsupported dreams. Now Amanda realized how carelessly she had behaved in a difficult situation, hid her head in the sand, like a stupid ostrich. The reason for that could have been those pregnancy hormones. And fear, of course. Fear of parents, of doctors, of the future. And now the falling belly reminded Amanda that the problem wasn't going anywhere, and she couldn't put it off any longer. Even if she continued to keep quiet, they would notice. The first, of course, would be the stepmother. She'll say to the father, "God, how can I live with myself?" That morning, Amanda walked to the school with her jeans unbuttoned. No one noticed. She wore a long, wide t-shirt on top. If only everything else was as easy to fix, she thought. And then there was Emily not being around. A friend was sick. She'd had heart problems since childhood. Suddenly, at the end of the summer, it had gotten worse. Emily was taken to the capital for surgery. The friend will be there for at least 2 or 3 months, if not longer. She even took a leave of absence from school. Amanda was worried about her friend. They talked every night, supporting each other. And yet the absence of the only understanding and kind-hearted person at such a moment was an additional challenge for Amanda. On that gray, overcast October day, Amanda returned from school in a gloomy mood. As always, she found on the refrigerator a list of things to do from her stepmother: wipe the floors, cook dinner, buy some groceries. But today the girl had no energy even for these household chores. On the morning of her first class, Amanda felt the baby inside her move. In the first moment, she experienced non-rational feelings: tenderness, joy, love. It seemed, in general, some kind of warmth for the baby that was growing inside her. And then a very different emotion came over her. Amanda finally realized that inside her was a living person with arms, legs, and heart, and maybe even with feelings. This is a huge responsibility, unbearable for Amanda. She can't even tell her parents about this person. Still hasn't made up her mind. What kind of mother is she for the rest of the day? The girl remained in gloomy silence. No one touched Amanda much. She saw no way out. Life seemed a burden. The people around her were cold, indifferent, evil. And in this world she wants to bring a child. What can such a mother give her? Nothing, not even basic protection. And now, sitting in an empty, quiet apartment, Amanda thought over the decision. A terrible, irrevocable, but, it seems, the only right one. The girl was overcome with doubts. Of course, it was not easy to take such a step. But the more she thought about her situation, the more she was convinced that she had to act. What's the point of staying here? She asked herself. My father doesn't need me, and my stepmother doesn't need me. She'd be glad to have a place for her own beloved children. Even James, who had once seemed so loving and caring, had betrayed her. How can anyone ever be trusted? Amanda is alone in this whole world, and no one will ever help her. Except Emily. But she needs support herself. Bad things happen to mostly good people, to people who don't deserve it. To keep herself from changing her mind, Amanda got up from her cozy couch and walked outside in what she was wearing. It was pouring rain. The homemade shorts and t-shirt were clearly not appropriate for the weather. Amanda could see goosebumps on her bare arms and legs, but somehow she didn't feel cold. The girl knew where she was going. There was only one place in their neighborhood suitable for Amanda's plan: a new building, a 16-story building. They say it has spacious apartments with high ceilings and big windows. Must be nice to live in a place like that. And here's Amanda standing outside this building, looking up. It's not hard to climb up the fire escape to the roof. And then, scary. But where do you go? Strangers were rushing past. Some glanced at Amanda with indifferent eyes. Others did not notice a teenage girl freezing in the October rain in summer shorts and a t-shirt. Everyone has their own business, everyone has their own worries. What to speak of strangers, if even her own father didn't care about Amanda? Child, are you all right? Amanda shuddered with surprise when she heard a dry and at the same time concerned voice. The girl turned around and met the gaze of worried light blue eyes. Before her stood an old woman in a long cloak. Small, thin, slightly hunched, pale. Thin strands of gray hair were poking out from under her gray shawl. What? Amanda didn't understand. She was far away from here now. Her heart clenched with fear. Her legs were stiff and she was shivering. What are you up to? As if the old woman had read the girl's thoughts. Come to my place. I'll warm you with tea, and you'll tell me everything." Amanda wanted to refuse, but the old woman spoke in a tone that did not tolerate objections, confident and at the same time kind and affectionate. She looked at Amanda with sympathy and curiosity. She cared. The stranger really wanted to know what misfortune had befallen this young girl. And it wasn't idle interest. Amanda felt that the old woman wanted to help her. Amazing. Amazing. Could this really happen? Amanda obediently followed the old woman. She was saying something as she walked and kept looking back, as if checking to see if the strange girl was following her. Only when she was in the old woman's small, clean apartment did Amanda realize that she was very cold. The warmth took her into its embrace, gave her a feeling of security and satisfaction. Amanda suddenly remembered what she had just wanted to do and shuddered. Now the thought seemed terribly wrong. "Come into the kitchen," the old woman smiled and gestured to the table. "What kind of tea do you like, black or green?" "Black with milk, please, if I may." "Why not?" The old woman put the kettle on the stove, took out dishes and simple food from the cupboard, store cookies, wafers, cheap candies, homemade jam. All of it was soothing to Amanda. She relaxed, felt pleasantly sleepy. It felt so good here. An island of calm and comfort in the middle of a gray, crazy world. "Well, everything is ready," the old woman said. Amanda finally finished setting the table and sat down across from her guest. "Now tell me what your trouble is." Lucy was embarrassed. She wanted to open up to this kind woman, but what would she think when she found out? Judgment, of course. Of that there was no doubt. Lucy was afraid to tell even her own family. And people of the older generation are even more categorical in such matters. "Don't be embarrassed or afraid of anything," sighed the old woman. "By the way, I don't think I introduced myself. My name is Pamela, and you're Amanda? That's a wonderful name. It's what I wanted to name my daughter. I've dreamed of having kids my whole life, but it never came true. I haven't dreamed yet, but I have," Amanda confessed to herself. Realizing that there was no retreat, she added, "I'm expecting a baby. And I just turned 18. My boyfriend left me. And I can't tell my parents. That's all. Now the old lady will condemn her and throw her out on the street. Maybe she'll give her a lecture on morality first. And she'd be right, by the way. Amanda really is stupid and unscrupulous to be in this situation." But Pamela suddenly did something completely unexpected. She walked over to Amanda and hugged her tightly and very gently. And then Amanda couldn't take it anymore. All the worries and fears of the last few days began to come out of her with tears and sobs. The old woman soothingly stroked her back with her hard, dry palm and said something softly. Amanda couldn't make out all the words, but Pamela seemed to be telling her not to hold back and to cry as much as she needed to. When the tears dried up, Amanda, to her surprise, felt better. Strength and energy came from somewhere. Even breathing became easier. "That's good." Pamela smiled at her, returning to her seat. "Sometimes you need to cry. Now tell me more about it. We'll see what we can do to help you." Amanda smiled at the kind old woman. Was there really one person in the world who wanted to help her? It was true, she wasn't alone anymore. Amanda took a deep breath and told Pamela everything about her mother who had left so early, about her stepmother and father, and about James. Of course, he was especially hard to remember. Amanda also mentioned Amber, who was now in a hospital 100 kilometers away. Pamela listened without interrupting. Amanda could see in her face that the old woman was not judging her guest. She pities, sympathizes, worries, but definitely remains on the girl's side. Amanda felt Pamela's support and approval, and it gave her strength and confidence. That was it. Amanda finished her story. "So why did you come here? To the high rise?" Pamela frowned. Amanda lowered her eyes. Now she was afraid to admit what she had wanted to do only 40 minutes ago. But the old woman seemed to understand. "You're just like me," she said suddenly, and shook her head. "I was in the same situation too, and I didn't see any way out. I didn't want to live. So girl, don't think that you are alone. And don't blame yourself for anything. You fell in love? Lost your head? Who doesn't? Especially since you don't see affection and care at home. So your heart went out to this James. And he's a coward. What can you do?" Amanda looked at Pamela in surprise. The old woman had managed to express so clearly in words what she felt. She'd only gotten involved with James because she'd been missing his affection, care, and attention for a long time, ever since her mother had passed away. It seemed to Amanda that now, finally, she wasn't alone. She had James. She wanted it so badly that she probably didn't pay attention to the alarm bells. Were there any? Of course there were. I've been in the same situation myself, Pamela sighed. Had you? Amanda had forgotten her own distress for a moment. Would you tell me? Pamela grinned. It was a difficult story for her. But the girls sitting in front of her now, it was important to hear it. Perhaps fate itself had brought them together. It was no coincidence that Amanda had gotten in Pamela's way at the right and crucial moment. No, the old woman was sure that the girl would not have committed this terrible act. Most likely she would have come to her senses on the way to the roof or standing on the edge. Pamela saw in Amanda's eyes that she wanted to live and had even managed to love her baby. Yes, the girl was in a difficult position, but it would all pass. And fears and pain will not be easy. And yet there are many good things ahead for Amanda. The girl will realize this once she calms down a little. Pamela's story should help Amanda calm down, at least for a confused girl. It will be interesting to hear the story of someone who has had to experience the same thing she herself has. Pamela had it harder, I think. Times were different. A lot more was required of girls then than it is now. Tell me, Amanda asked, looking at Pamela curiously. It won't take long. Do you have time? I do now. Amanda made herself comfortable in her chair and prepared to listen. Pamela was born in a small town to a large family. Her father and mother worked on the collective farm. Every morning they had to go to another town. Both of them returned late. Accordingly, the household and the younger children were in the care of the eldest daughter. The nimble and agile Pamela coped with everything playfully. She returned from school, quickly did her homework and began to do things to clean the floors, cook lunch and dinner, wash and hang the laundry. Work burned in young Pamela's hands. She even had time to go for a walk with her girlfriends before picking up the younger ones from daycare. Then you can't get away from the little ones. For such children need an eye, and an eye this Pamela learned very well. By her 15th birthday, the girl dreamed of being a teacher. Most of all, she liked math and physics. These were the subjects she wanted to teach children when she grew up. Teachers praised the clever student and predicted a great future for her. And so it turned out in the end. But at what cost? It happened so that in a neighboring town died sister of Pamela's father. A very young woman's heart failed. The head of the family died at the front a few years ago, so that the children were left round orphans. There were 4 of them. Neighborhood children decided to distribute among relatives, and the eldest daughter, 15-year-old Emma, was given to Pamela's family. Emma seemed to be the same age as Pamela. But friendship between the girls did not work. 2 different characters. Cheerful, quick-witted Pamela and slow, thoughtful Emma seemed somehow different, and they had nothing to talk about. Emma, unlike her cousin, was not very eager to study. But she was a wonderful hostess who could cook complicated dishes and clean so well that everything sparkled. Emma had no patience for clutter, and she put things in their proper places. It was like it was in her blood. To herself, Emma didn't seem overly affluent, carefree, unserious. And she was always making remarks to her sister she dusted the wrong way, washed the dishes too long, and kneaded the dough the wrong way. This irritated Pamela, which of course did not contribute to the strengthening of relations between the sisters. Parents also added oil to the fire. They constantly set Emma as an example to their eldest daughter. Look how clever Emma is, praised her niece mother. Such a wife to anyone for happiness. And what about me? Pamela was indignant. I do my chores too, and look after the children and clean. I've managed without her before. How am I any worse? You laugh too loudly and answer too much, said the father. How it annoyed young Pamela. But there was a great advantage to Emma's arrival. Now the girls shared the household chores equally, and Pamela had more free time to go out with her friends. Emma had no desire to go out. She hadn't made friends with anyone from the neighborhood. So the girl quietly let her cousin Emma go out in the evenings and looked after the little ones. Okay, go, Emma sighed every time I left her, she grumbled. Sister's just for show. In fact, she was even glad to stay, at least for a while, as mistress of the house. Oh, those evenings young Pamela needed them. Evenings were the best time. Pamela still recalled with nostalgia her walks through Nashville in the company of teenagers like herself. The things they did. They played like kids, slid down snowy mountains, played soccer, jumped over the fire, and swam in the river after sunset, despite their parents' prohibitions. It was fun and good fun. Adults watched the fun of boys and girls with a smile. Probably they remembered the time when they were like that themselves. Sometimes one of the men even joined the noisy company, which caused laughter and approval of teenagers. One of those men was sometimes Ben. He had not lived in Nashville for a long time, but he often visited his parents who remained here. Ben himself at one time went to study in the city and stayed there, as happened to many. It was said that Ben worked at a big factory and had already reached the position of a shop manager. He had his own apartment and a brand new red car. But he didn't get married. This fact bothered the locals a lot. Women tried to match the enviable groom with their daughters and nieces. Ben's mother lamented and dreamed aloud of grandchildren. Only Ben himself was in no hurry to marry. In his own words, he was doing quite well as it was. Ben at that moment was already about 30 years old. A grown man, almost old by the standards of 15-year-old Pamela. But he was nothing like the people of that age the girl knew. First, Ben dressed fashionably and stylishly. Secondly, he joked a lot, laughed, and generally behaved relaxed and carefree. Here and with teenagers did not bother to race the ball. Many girls from the company were in love with him. Some of them talked about it directly, and some of them didn't even need to admit it. Everything became noticeable by the looks they threw at Ben. Ben liked talking to young people. That evening, the man spent the late afternoon playing ball with the teenagers. Pamela, daydreaming as always, secretly admired his deft, precise movements. Ben sometimes caught her eye, and then the girl shamefully lowered her eyes. How handsome he was, and so different from the natives. Like a man from another world. But why? How is he from another world to city? It's a different life there. Yes, Pamela had been to the city several times. The smart, wide streets, the motley crowd of people rushing somewhere. Squares, fountains, beautiful parks. This splendor even made the girl dizzy. Life in the city was like a never-ending holiday. Ben touched Pamela a few times that evening accidentally during the game. It was as if a lightning bolt struck her at those moments. He didn't seem to notice. When it got dark, the teens went to a bench outside the neighborhood. It was their favorite gathering place. One of the boys would make a fire because it was dark here at this time. So they sat some on a bench, some on fallen trees, and some just on the grass. They told each other scary stories, discussed the events of the day, and dreamed. The atmosphere was pleasant and light. Yes, Pamela loved those hours. Then we slowly went home. Pamela was one of the first to leave. In her family, there was a strict rule to show up before midnight, even if tomorrow was a day off, and she didn't have to go to school. The girl could not disobey her parents. If she tried to do that, her mother and father would not let her out at all next time. They were strict. That night, Ben stayed with the boys. It wasn't surprising. It happened sometimes. The teenagers liked to hear him talk about his childhood. It's time to go, Pamela sighed, glancing at her wristwatch, a gift from her father. It was almost 12 o'clock at night. The friends sympathized and went back to their leisurely conversation. It was good for them to stay together around the fire, happy and carefree. Pamela didn't want to go home at all, but there was nothing to do. She walked through the deserted, dark streets of the village. It was quiet, very quiet. Only from the bench, now quite far away, the wind sometimes brought scraps of phrases and laughter. Large bright stars shone in the sky. The path was illuminated by the diffused light of the pale moon. Suddenly, Pamela heard light footsteps. Someone was catching up with her. The girl stopped and looked back. Ben was approaching her at a light trot. He was smiling at her and following her with purpose. Pamela's heart sank into her heels and her ears rattled. When she realized it, she still couldn't believe it. Now Ben will come up to me, and it will appear that there is some quite domestic reason why he is now hurrying after the young neighbor, thought the girl. You're fast, Ben said, either delighted or surprised as he approached Pamela. She lowered her eyes to the floor, embarrassed. It was a good thing it was dark outside and Ben couldn't see her flush. Otherwise, he'd have realized at once that Pamela was one of his many admirers. Are you going home already? The man asked. Pamela nodded affirmatively, still looking at the toes of her dusty sandals. Ben's proximity made her heart race, and she felt dizzy. They'd never been alone like this before, and there was no one else around. Her parents are waiting. My father scolds me if I'm home after 12, but he doesn't beat me, she said. Ben looked at Pamela with interest. No, but he swears. I see. My parents were strict too. Well, you'll grow up soon and you'll be your own boss. How old are you? Already 16. Almost, Pamela answered. Wow. Already a bride. I remember you as a little girl. And now you're so beautiful. Ben scrutinized the girl very closely, as if groping her. He liked what he saw. Pamela was both pleased and a little afraid. You are really very beautiful, said the man. Pamela flashed to the roots of her hair and smiled. These words created some kind of magic. The girl really felt strong, mature, and incredibly beautiful. She squared her shoulders and finally dared to look into Ben's eyes. In them, Pamela saw sincere admiration and also interest. Ben was openly admiring her. A wave of unexplored sensations came over the girl, and she wanted him to touch her. Ben, as if guessing her thoughts, covered her shoulder with his palm. Pamela felt a wave of goosebumps run up her spine. Shall we walk to the river? Ben said hoarsely, keeping his gaze fixed on the girl. Under that gaze, Pamela felt like a queen, a goddess, the most beautiful woman on earth. She would have followed Ben to the ends of the earth for that feeling. Never mind that her father would give her a beating for being late. It's okay, he'll find something to complain about. She'd tell her parents later that she'd been sitting around the campfire with the boys and had forgotten the time. When Ben repeated his question about the walk to the river, Pamela smiled and nodded affirmatively. That's a good girl, said the man. His affirmative answer made him the happiest man in the universe. It turned out to be very pleasant to feel your power over a man, especially a man like Ben. He took the girl's hand gently and led her toward Poplar Street. Just beyond it began the hillside on which the village was situated, and at the foot of it flowed the quiet river Fedor. In the summer, Pamela used to splash in it almost every day with her friends. But that had been in the daytime. Now it was night. The moon shone in the sky, in the light of which everything seemed so unfamiliar, so magical and mysterious. Ben and Pamela sat down on a fallen tree that served as a local shop. You're a ravishingly beautiful girl. Ben looked at his companion without looking away. Pamela was not like the other girls. Her misdemeanors were different from the silly pranks of her friends. This Ben had realized not so long ago and had lost his peace ever since. His words made a great impression on Pamela. She had always known she was different from her girlfriends, always felt special. And now Ben had confirmed her hunch. But was it right to sit alone with a grown man at night by the river and listen to his compliments? Your eyes, your hair, your smile. You're perfect. I've never met anyone like you before, Ben said. Really, I'm embarrassed, Pamela finally admitted. I don't know what to say. And then Ben kissed her. It was so sudden that she didn't even have time to pull away. And then she didn't want to. I'm sorry I couldn't help myself, Ben said, looking at Pamela carefully. She smiled and kissed Ben herself. She decided to let it be. She would think about whether she was doing the right thing later. For now, the girl just wanted to enjoy this magical and absolutely fantastic moment. Ben is near. He likes him. And he doesn't just like him. This grown-up, handsome man is the dream of everyone in their town, down to 10-year-old girls. He chose her. It all happened right on the beach. Pamela didn't realize it at first, and then it was too late to leave, and she didn't want to. To be honest, it hurt a little. It was good that it was over quickly. The girl hoped she had behaved properly. Ben smiled, stroked her hair, took out a pack of cigarettes and smoked. Would you like one? He offered one to Pamela. She shook her head negatively. Now she felt stupid and constrained. What to say, how to behave. Ben had better take the initiative again. Are you all right? Are you okay? He finally asked. Pamela nodded. All sorts of thoughts were running through her mind. It appeared that Ben's feelings for her were very serious. He would probably take her back to the city with him now. They would live in his apartment. It's going to take some getting used to. It probably won't be easy, but Ben will help her. He's such a strong, confident adult. You can't be afraid of anything. Pamela will be like a stone wall behind him. The main thing is that Ben loves her. He won't be as indifferent and irritable as her parents, but will surround her with love and care. The way he was looking at her, Don't tell anyone. Ben squeezed himself out. It was like an ice-cold gush of water. The voice of the man who just half an hour ago had been staring at her with admiring eyes now sounded cold and indifferent. "I won't," Pamela replied. "That's right. And even if you did, no one would believe you." "Why not?" Pamela wondered what had happened to make Ben change so suddenly. Maybe she'd done something wrong. But the man understood the question in his own way. "Do you want to know why no one will believe you?" He grinned. "Well, think about it. Everyone in town knows that all the local girls are in love with me. And not just girls, but older ladies too. There's a lot of rumors about me around here. The ladies make up stories, one more interesting than the other. But no one believes them for a long time." Pamela nodded. Ben was right. Even if she told what had happened, no one would believe her. They'd think she was just another lovesick fool dreaming about him, sharing her fantasies. So it's best to keep quiet or they'll laugh. Why? She did ask a question. Why, of all the girls in their company, had Ben gone after her? He must have had feelings for her. She wanted to hear again that she was special. No reason. Ben smiled. You just happened to fall into his lap. He patted Pamela on the shoulder and walked up the slope. The man climbed easily and very quickly. Pamela sat on the bank for a while, thinking about what had happened. Tears ran down her cheeks. She had already believed that happiness was near. She had even begun to think of herself as an incredible beauty. To think that in her mind Pamela had already moved to the city, to Ben's apartment. You've got to be such a fool. She wasn't special, and if she was, it was in a bad way. I don't think any of her friends could have gotten into such a mess. And Pamela? She's hanging her ears, feeling like her favorite fool. But there was no turning back the clock, and the girl made a decision that seemed to her at that moment the only right one. She forgot about what had happened, hid the events of that evening in the hidden corners of her memory. There was nothing, that's all. At home, the girl got it from her father. She patiently listened to her parents moralizing. She was not even shaken by another comparison with Emma, who had long since slept in her bed. Why take offense at the truth? Her father was right, that's just the way it was. Since then, she hadn't been drawn to the outdoors anymore. No, she hadn't become despondent or fearful. She just didn't want to go to her friends because she might meet Ben, and she didn't want that at all. It was too painful, too hard, and Pamela would feel dirty and stupid around him. After all, he knew her secret, he did, and now he saw her through completely different eyes. The parents did not notice any change in their eldest daughter. They were too busy with work, household chores, fiddling with the kids. But Emma, sensitive Emma, immediately suspected something. One day the cousin couldn't bear to ask her directly. What happened that night? I can tell something's wrong. Your face is gone. Did you have a fight with your friends? Golden untruths were spilled. You guys fight all the time, but you make up all the time. This is different. You haven't set foot outside in 2 weeks. And before that, you couldn't stay indoors for a day. So Pamela went off the deep end and told Emma everything. Even though they were not friends, but the cousin will not betray and will not run to tell everyone about what she found out. Emma was reliable and serious, though she was a bore, of course. Pamela wanted to share her misfortune with someone. Telling her sister made her feel better. The relief was instantaneous, but now Emma was frowning and thinking hard. You do realize it's a crime, she said at last. What? But what he did. He belongs in prison. You're a minor, a child, and he's a grown man who took advantage of your inexperience. Pamela didn't see her story that way. And it's not your fault, Emma continued. You're just a teenager. It's his fault. That's why he told you to keep quiet. Pamela nodded. Emma was right. Then, sitting on the riverbank, she blamed herself. She'd thought herself stupid, naive, dirty, promiscuous. But the real culprit was Ben. The realization of this simple truth made her feel better. And Pamela did something she'd never thought she'd do before she hugged Emma tightly. Thank you, she said to her sister. It was the first time she'd ever felt warm feelings for an unloved relative. She was so smart, Emma, and sensitive. Are we going to tell our parents? Emma asked. No, not at all. Pamela objected. I want to forget the whole thing as soon as possible. You realize that even though it was his fault, it would still be a shame for me if people found out. Emma nodded understandingly. Of course, she knew what her sister was worried about. Reputation is a very fragile and important thing, especially if you live in a small town. Okay, let's just forget about it. Emma nodded. But forgetting it didn't work. 3 months later, Pamela was horrified to realize she was expecting a baby. It was October. Vacation was long over. Ben had left town even earlier. After he left, Pamela breathed a sigh of relief. Still, the proximity of this man was very tense, even though he tried to stay away from her. But Pamela remembered perfectly well how her pregnant mother had walked. And of course, in her 15 years, she knew the main signs. She had them all at once. Nausea, increased appetite, a tugging sensation in her abdomen, and most importantly, a delay. She hadn't noticed it at first. It had happened to her before. But soon it became impossible to ignore the troubling symptoms. She couldn't even tell Emma about it, but she couldn't hide the shame of it either. What to do? What to do? It's a disgrace. They'll start looking for the culprit. No one will believe that Ben is the baby's father. It's useless to even say anything. This man has an impeccable reputation. He's the standard bearer for the locals. And Ben's right. A lot of the girls in town have a crush on him, and they make up stories about him from time to time, that he gave them a special look, or a hug, or a kiss. Or maybe it's all stories. But nobody believes the girls. So they'll definitely look for the culprit. And they'll probably assign it to some boy who can't justify himself. Andrew, most likely. Andrew lives near Pamela. They're kind of friends. They cheat off each other's homework. The kid sometimes carries heavy buckets home for the girl. The kids even tease them about being bride and groom over the summer. Andrew's the one who's going to get suspicious. Poor fellow, he'll have a hard time, all because of her. The mother will weep and quietly hate the daughter who brought such shame on the family. The father will probably even benefit, won't he? I don't think so. He is holding on, sometimes, and for smaller misdemeanors handed out to children slaps, and often recalled those times when young people birching, considering such methods undeservedly forgotten methods of education. Life became a nightmare. Pamela would become an outcast. Other girls will be forbidden by their families to even go near her. And the child, what will happen to him? The world will be hostile to him long before he's born. And then it'll get worse. Pamela can't handle it, definitely can't handle it. This life. What's it for? At night, when everyone was fast asleep, Pamela cried quietly into her pillow so as not to wake anyone. Surprisingly, the tears brought relief. Temporary, though. The girl desperately tried to find a way out to hide the pregnancy, and then quietly give birth somewhere and leave the baby in the forest. No, it's too complicated and scary. And could she leave a defenseless baby to die? It's not his fault. Try to terminate the pregnancy herself. It seemed like a lifesaver at first. Pamela carried heavy buckets and steamed for long periods in the bath she knew from her mother, who had been pregnant several times. When her daughter was already old enough, all of this was dangerous for women in childbirth. But her baby seemed to be strong. Nothing helped, the baby stayed inside. Moreover, it was actively growing, because Pamela already had a belly, still almost imperceptible, very neat. But that was just the beginning. Pamela was not herself. At school, did not listen to teachers, did not do her homework. The girl forgot about her dream of becoming a teacher. What kind of career plans can there be when there are such problems? And Pamela is not studying now. She will have a child in her arms. She would be a single mother in front of everyone. And so young. Emma tried to rouse her cousin. She thought she was worried about the story from the summer, but Emma had no idea it was more serious than that. And Pamela hadn't told her, but she couldn't say it out loud.
One night, lying in her narrow bunk, Pamela decided that it was all too hard for her, too unbearable, and she didn't want this life at all, because there would be nothing more good. Only tears of shame, sighs, poverty, general disapproval, reproaches, even beatings of parents. Is it worth clinging to such a life? And she suddenly thought of the Albany River, flowing at the foot of the hill on which the town settled.
It was on the bank of the river that the event that had divided her life into before and after had taken place. So it would end there, Pamela decided. She got out of bed, trying not to creak the springs, grabbed from the table the long silk ribbon that Emma used to weave into her thick braid in the mornings, and slipped out of the house in a light nightgown that reached almost to her ankles. It was already October, and her arms were immediately covered with goose flesh from the cold, but it would not be long before Pamela could feel nothing at all. She hurried toward the river, almost running, for she was afraid to change her mind. She stopped at the water's edge. She had to tie her hands with this ribbon, so that at the decisive moment she would not slacken and swim out. Pamela struggled, but managed to do it. Soon her hands were bound wrist to wrist. She could not swim out now. All that remained was to enter the river and take a few steps. The river was not wide, but it was deep enough. Children were not allowed here without their parents. A pale moon shone from the sky, about the same as then, a silent witness to Pamela's terrible secret. The girl stepped into the icy water. The river burned her feet with cold. But Pamela took another step, then another and another. And now the water was almost up to her chest. There was not much more to go. It was frightening to take those fateful steps. But Pamela had no way out. She realized it quite clearly. All she had to do was be brave enough to put all her problems behind her. I thought about that moment a lot afterward, Pamela said, resting her chin on her fist. Amanda stares at her with her eyes wide open. She realizes that the story ended well because Pamela is sitting across from her, but she still feels uneasy. I didn't see the way out. Then the old woman shook her head. Indeed, she didn't. It wasn't as bad as I had pictured in my head. But I realized it much later. If it hadn't been for a happy accident, I wouldn't have realized it at all. When Pamela was up to her neck in the icy water, she heard a desperate cry from behind her. "Stop, don't." Then she heard a loud splash. Someone was rushing to her rescue. The girl froze. The situation seemed too unreal. Then she slowly turned around. It was Emma, wearing a nightgown as long as Pamela's but with her father's robe over it. Emma reached her sister in no time and dragged her toward the shore. Pamela resisted. Soon both girls were on the ground, drenched, freezing, shivering. "Get home." Stern Emma commanded. "You'll catch cold." Pamela nodded. Emma looked at her sister's bound wrists and sighed. Then she quickly untied the tape, took Pamela's hand, and the girls ran home. They quickly changed into dry clothes and dived into their beds, each in her own. But a moment later, Emma was under the covers with her sister. "I knew something was wrong with you a long time ago," she whispered. "I've been watching you. What are you up to? Why would you do something like that?" "You don't know anything," Pamela sighed. She was shivering, even though she was warm under the blanket. Perhaps it was fear that was beginning to realize what she had almost done. "So tell me," Emma demanded. "I won't tell anyone," Pamela said. Emma lay silent and obviously thinking about something. "You fool," she said at last. "Why didn't you consult me at once? Your problem is easily solved." And Emma told about a witch doctor from their native village, who had been curing women in their village and the surrounding villages of unwanted pregnancies all her life. And whoever went to her, even rumored to have come from the city. She helps young girls too. Emma continued to share information. She helps them for free, just because they have no other choice. And with the adults, Miss Hannah asks for money or groceries and she will help. Emma looked at her sister hopefully. Was there still more to come? Did Pamela really have a way out? "Of course she does," Emma said confidently. "Tomorrow, after school, I'll go to Miss Hannah's and make all the arrangements." And Emma was serious, reliable. She certainly didn't fail. The next day she had a plan ready. Emma had asked her parents to stay with her old friends in a neighboring town for the weekend and supposedly decided to spend time with her sister. In reality, the girls were going to stay at Ms. Hannah's cabin for 24 hours. The old woman was already waiting for the girls. She warned the sisters that it would take time for Pamela to recover from the procedure. That's why Emma had made up the story with her friends. Pamela was scared of a lot of things: pain, failure, exposure. And she was ashamed in front of this stranger, Ms. Hannah. Although Emma convinced her that she had seen all sorts of things in her life and treated everything with understanding. Even pities young girls in trouble. That's why she helps them for free. Ms. Hannah lived in a small house on the edge of town. A cozy, clean, bright house. Pamela even smiled when she saw it. She had imagined the witch's lair quite differently: dark rooms with old-fashioned windows, bundles of dried herbs hanging everywhere, a skinny black cat with evil eyes. There was a cat, but it was ginger, fat, fluffy, indifferent. Miss Hana received the girls cordially, gave them tea, asked Pamela about her trouble. She told Pamela everything without a secret, because she knew that this old woman would understand her and would not condemn her. MS. Hana nodded silently, shook her head, and whispered something cursing to Ben under her breath. The procedure itself took place in a separate room. Pamela had to lie down on a special table, hard, long, cold. It was painful. Despite the fact that Miss Hana had given the young patient some kind of potion beforehand, Pamela bravely endured. She tried not to show that she felt anything at all. But at one moment the pain became so unbearable that the girl lost consciousness, simply blacked out, fell into darkness. When she came to, she saw Miss Hana and Emma leaning over her. She herself was already lying on the soft bed. Both had worried faces. "Well, thank goodness you're awake," Miss Hana exhaled. "I thought it was over." "Is it over?" Pamela asked in a weak voice. She felt pain in every cell of her body, not as sharp as the pain on the table, but still. "Yes, it's all over, MS," Hana replied. "The baby was clingy. I could barely manage it. I've never seen such a stubborn one. He almost took you with him. But you're young and strong. You did it." Pamela was frightened. She was afraid MS. Hana would say it was all for nothing, that the pregnancy was still developing. "I don't know if you'll be able to be a mother now that you're older, MS," Hana said. "I don't think so. The procedure was too hard, not without consequences. It happens." Pamela breathed out a sigh of relief. What did it matter what happened years from now? The main thing was that everything was fine now. She could finish school and go to college. All roads were open to her again. Pamela then felt happy and free. Many years had passed. Pamela, as she dreamed, became a teacher of physics and math. She finished school in this city, studied at the institute. The girl tried not to remember what happened to her then. But the story, of course, left an imprint on Pamela's behavior. She became more experienced, wiser, more cautious, and no longer allowed dangerous situations in her life, avoided guys. Pamela did not trust men, and even planned to live her whole life alone and independent. Other girls aspired to marry, dreamed of family life. Pamela was quite satisfied with a bachelor existence. Love did not pass her by. It happened when Pamela worked at school. Once in the gym needed repair. A construction crew arrived. It was led by a tall, russet-haired, blue-eyed guy. When Pamela first saw Adam, her heart gave a sweet shiver. She had forbidden herself to feel anything at first, but it was beyond her strength. All the more so when Adam began to pay the pretty young teacher some attention. This time everything was different, beautiful, romantic, and sincere. Adam asked Pamela out on dates and always greeted her with a bouquet of beautiful flowers. They sat in cafes, went to the movies and theaters, just walked around the city, talked a lot, got to know each other closer and closer, and closer. And at one fine moment, Pamela realized that she couldn't live without Adam. Happiness. He felt the same way. The young people got married. Pamela moved into her husband's apartment, which he got from work. The couple were happy. They lived soul to soul, but they couldn't have a baby. And I wanted one so badly, Pamela sighed. Of course I knew what was wrong. Hana had warned me that there might be problems with children in the future. But at the time, having just gotten rid of the problem, it didn't bother me at all. A sad Pamela told her husband all about it. She didn't want there to be any secrets between them. Pamela was mentally prepared for Adam to leave her. Who would want someone like that? But he only hugged her tightly and told her it wasn't important. Adam took pity on me, Pamela continued. He, like Emma, blamed Ben for everything. So we'll have to live alone, without children. That's all right, that's what happens. And they lived, enjoying each other, traveling, working, meeting friends, visiting interesting places, reading, sharing impressions of what they had read, watching TV together, supported each other in everything. Adam and Pamela became the closest and dearest people. Wonderful, simply golden years, full of love, acceptance, and mutual understanding. For Pamela, they were a reward, payback for a cold and unhappy childhood. But time takes its toll. Pamela and Adam grew old. His heart problems have worsened since his retirement. And 2 years ago, Pamela was left alone. Adam had a heart attack right in front of his terrified wife. She took the loss hard and still hasn't fully recovered. It's only now that he's not around that I realize what loneliness is. Pamela shook her head. It's when there's no one to talk to, no one to care about. It's hard, Amanda nodded sympathetically. She temporarily forgot about her own problem. What kind of problem is it anyway? I'll tell my parents they'll be grumpy, but they'll figure something out. There will be a way out. This is not the old days, when the family of a girl who got into such a situation lay in indelible shame. The XXI century is here, and this does not happen. Although, of course, it will not be easy. The apartment is small, and there's a new baby. Do you know what I was thinking? Pamela suddenly smiled. What if you came to my place and rented a room from me? Not for money, but for domestic help. I'm old, weak. Sometimes it's hard even to go to the store, and here I have a living soul near me. I don't know, Amanda laughed, realizing at once that it was an ideal option. But it's not profitable for you. The room could be rented out for a lot of money. I don't have that kind of money, and all you're offering to do is help you with the household chores. It's an unequal exchange. Take it. Pamela smiled warmly. And you feel good, and I'm not so lonely. And when the baby is born, I'll help you with the baby. I'd love to. I've never had children of my own. So I just love babies, Pamela continued. How many relatives have you swaddled? It's exhausting. And you're going to need some help, too. Amanda still couldn't believe her good fortune. It was the perfect solution to the problem. A real solution. The old woman is really lonely, and Amanda needs support and participation. They would save each other. Thank you. Tears came to her eyes. The future is finally becoming clearer. Bright rainbow colors. And faith. For the first time, I felt the joy of being a mom soon. I now have a plan, I have support, which means everything will be okay.